I've done a fair amount of work in Philly, which is 90 years territory. No, you don't want that to happen. So you're going to do the boards first? Yeah.
Okay, have 7 o'clock. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the West Goshen Township Board of Supervisors meeting for today, which is November the 16th, 2021. To start the meeting, will you please stand and join me in the pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So please be aware that this meeting is being live streamed on our Township YouTube channel, and the meeting may also be recorded by people present in the room, either by audio or video. So before we start our main agenda, we have something very pleasant to do this evening. So I'm not sure who's going to, I'm asking to step up and present some awards tonight. It looks like Chief Carroll will be you. Before you do so, I do want to say on behalf of the board, our sincere condolences to you for your recent loss of your father, to your family, to yourself. And obviously we thank him for his service to the country and his 45-year in law enforcement, which culminated in the best job of all, which is being police chief of West Goshen Township. So, over to you.
Thank you. And thank you for allowing us to do this tonight. This is our yearly presentation of awards. You can bet that every day the men and women of West Goshen Police Department do an excellent job. And from time to time, our officers and our citizens do something we think deserves a little extra recognition. So we're going to talk about some of them tonight. So the first one I'm going to ask officers Edwards, Manco, and Hero to please step to the front of the room. All three of these officers are not only West Goshen police officers, but they're also assigned to the East Westchester Regional Emergency Response Team.
Speak up a little bit.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. On February 11th at around 7 p.m., members of the West Goshen Police Department that are assigned to the Westchester Regional Emergency Response Team assisted the West County East Goshen Police Department with an armed barricaded subject. While the emergency response team was attempting to negotiate a peaceful surrender with the subject, they came under gunfire. ERT officers were able to stop the actions of the suspect, and as a result, the subject suffered a gunshot wound. 4 members of the ERT, including officers Edwards, Manco, and Hero, put together a hasty plan to enter the residence and save the life of the subject. Within moments they did so. Once gaining entry to the house, they were able to gain control of the subject's gun and provide life-saving first aid. As a result of these officers' quick and professional actions, the subject is alive today and awaiting trial for the crimes he committed that day. Today we honor them and award them with the West Goshen Police Department's Unit Commendation. So the unit commendation reads, in recognition of your teamwork on February 11th, 2021 during an emergency response situation that resulted in the saving of a human life. Your application of training, experience, and equipment exemplifies your dedication to duty, the preservation of life, and service to the community. On August 24th, at around 7:30 p.m., West Goshen officers responded to the pool at the Golf Club Apartments for a report of a 10-year-old boy that was drowning. When officers arrived, they learned that bystanders first saw a young female struggling to stay above the waterline. Autumn, Fritz, and Alex Adams, who were enjoying the pool that evening, saw the child struggling, responded, and pulled the young female from the water. The two then noticed a young male at the bottom of the pool not moving. Both Fritz and Adams jumped in, pulled the young male from the bottom of the pool and onto the pool deck. The child was revived with CPR and is doing fine today. The actions of both Autumn and Alex are an example to everyone of true citizen heroes. Without hesitation or concern for themselves, They sprung into action and saved the lives of 2 children. Today we honor them for their actions and award them with the West Goshen Township Police Department Citizens Award. And the Citizen Award reads, in recognition of your actions on August 24th, 2021, during a drowning event that saved the life of a child. Your ability to quickly identify and act in a life and death situation prevented a fatal outcome. We are honored to have you as part of our community. Thank you.
Good evening. Can I ask Officer Andrew Manco to join me up at the podium? Again. On August 29th of this year, the West Goshen Police Department received a call for a person standing on the outside of the railing on the Pottstown Pike Bridge overpass overlooking Route 322. It was later learned that the male subject was a resident of a group home facility in Westchester and had left due to feeling depressed and suicidal. Officer Andrew Manco was the first responding officer on the scene and immediately engaged the male in conversation, all while remaining conscientious about keeping a safe distance that the subject was comfortable with. After less than 20 minutes of productive conversation, Officer Manco garnered the trust of the male, which resulted in him walking back to safety and embracing Officer Manco in a hug. The professionalism and compassion displayed by Officer Manco led to a safe resolution and is an example of the traits that embody law enforcement today. The entire incident was captured on Officer Manco's body camera and is now being used for training purposes in programs such as the Crisis Intervention Team training. It is my honor to present Officer Manco with the Department Award for Merit, which is awarded to acknowledge an exceptional police service, which is beyond the call of duty. This award reads, in recognition of your actions on August 29th of 2021 during a suicide crisis response, your professionalism paired with your compassionate approach represent services of law enforcement at its highest level. Congratulations.
Desk Officer Scott Myers, come on. The West Goshen Township Police Department's Juvenile and Community Policing Unit consists of 4 officers. Those officers are certified as school resource officers and work in the schools. These officers also conduct various community policing activities within the community. One of those officers, Officer Myers, was hired in West Goshen in 2009. In 2018, Officer Myers was assigned to the Juvenile Community Relations Division. I had the pleasure of working with Officer Myers in the Juvenile Unit for almost 3 years. During Officer Myers' time in the Juvenile Unit, he has worked tirelessly in developing programs to allow our officers to engage with the community, especially the kids in the community. Officer Myers, as well as 3 other officers in the unit, have developed countless relationships with kids and their families that have allowed these families to turn a potentially negative interaction with the police into a positive interaction with the police. Officer Myers started the Gumshoes camp that is held every summer. This camp allows kids from the community to participate in a crime scene camp. Officer Myers and other members of the Juvenile Unit work with the camp participants to investigate a mock crime scene. Officer Myers has spent countless hours, including his own time, while off duty, putting this camp together. I witnessed firsthand Officer Myers interact with the camp participants and patiently guide them through the steps police take to solve the crime. Not only do camp participants have a chance to work closely with the officers, the participants have the officers' undivided attention during that camp and can ask different questions about the law enforcement events. Officer Myers has also started a trunk or treat event that is held every year during Halloween. This event allows community members, as well as other police departments, to compete in a competition where they decorate their vehicles for Halloween and also get dressed up in their favorite costume. Those of you who know Officer Myers, and many of the officers here, know that Halloween is his favorite day of the year. These 2 events are just a few examples of Officer Myers' commitment to bring the community together in a positive way. The Department Service Award recognizes officers whose work is above and beyond the norm and benefits both the department and the community. I would like to present Officer Myers with this award. award reads, in recognition of your tireless efforts to engage the community. Your commitment to organize extraordinary experiences for the residents of the township and beyond is a testament to the level of your initiative, work performance, and interpersonal relationships. Since the start of our annual Goshen camp, Ms. Shawn Jalava has volunteered her time every summer to assist the West Goshen Police Department putting on the camp. Ms. Jalava has been a teacher in the Westchester Area School District for over 25 years and is currently teaching at Greystone Elementary School after spending the majority of her teaching career at Fern Hill Elementary School. Ms. Jalava's love for teaching is shown by her demeanor in the classroom and her ability to individually engage every child at the camp and make each child feel welcome. Ms. Jalava brings out the best in every child and pushes the children to reach their full potential. One of the highlights of the camp is Ms. Jalava's homemade chocolate chip cookies. Ms. Jalava is one of the many reasons that this camp is such a success. The Citizens Award is presented to any citizen who assists West Goshen Police Department to accomplish their police department's mission. This award is presented to Ms. Shawn Jalava. Reads, in recognition of your continuing selfless efforts to support the township and educate the younger generations. Your willingness to assist our department and sacrifice your time makes us honored to have you as a part of our community. Thank you very much.
So I'd like to thank everybody who came out for these awards. I appreciate you coming out and supporting our officers and our citizens who did a great job this year, and I hope to see you next time we give out these awards. Mr. Chairman, that's what we have for tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That was wonderful. What a great way to start the evening. And I'm going to take a recess for a little bit to allow folks who don't want to stay for the glorious budget we're going to discuss. So thank you so much to all the team and the police department. Wonderful job. Thank you. We'll figure it out.
So I'm gonna just put these in the original order that
I need to check with Chris if he's got what you think you would do it that way.
Yeah, I know he sent it to Rick because Rick knows. So, yeah, I know the original one is what was posted.
So you're not doing that.
He's projected.
I was told the timeline on December 6th, and then I stayed here until December 6th. So I was I don't even know what I need. Because I'm bad stuff. Sometimes they end up in spam, sometimes I get I've talked to them. They cover you. You pay this no reading. Like a wicked what do I take? I guess all sickness.
I was going to say, you can.
agenda item tonight is the West Goshen Township 2022 preliminary budget. So just for the board's information, what I'd like to do in terms of a process is Christine, Chris, or staff to present the slides in the order we have in this presentation. And basically it'll go through the general fund first, and then sewer fund, waste and recycling, and then the other funds. Now what I'd like to do is let Christine present, for example, the general fund revenues, and then have a discussion about those, any questions or comments, or issues that the board has with any of the numbers in there. We can dive into the detailed budget if necessary at that point. And Christine will present the slides on expenses, we will talk about those for the general fund in the same process. So that way we can get the chunks of information, talk about it, have a discussion, and of course I'll ask for public comment after we have board input as well. Just one thing I think would work best for a process in terms of approval of the preliminary budget. Last year we tried to make changes during this actual session, and it got a little confusing as to tracking the kind of pluses and minuses that were being made. So given the fact that we've now basically made this available for the public to view on our website and through this process tonight, I'd like to suggest to the board that actually what we'll do is approve the preliminary budget for advertisement as it is been presented tonight and has been posted to the website. And then we'll track all the questions or changes that we agree on tonight, and then that will be incorporated into a future discussion in the December workshop, and then final budget approval at the December regular meeting. Does that work for the board? Good. So Christine, you don't have to capture everything we're saying tonight in terms of making sure it all gets incorporated. We're going to try to have a process that captures the changes for future incorporation, and we'll have a motion at the appropriate point to advertise the preliminary budget as presented. Okay? Mm-hmm. Very good. So let's go to the first slide, and I believe it'll be the highlight of all funds. So at this point, we're going to hit the highlights, and then we'll go into the individual funds from there. So.
Yeah, so basically we're looking at no millage rate increase for real estate taxes. As discussed previously, we're looking at $15 a quarter for sewer rates and $10 a quarter for trash rates. Salaries across all funds, we're looking at a 6% cost of living for non-uniform employees and an average of 3.5% for uniform employees. The only personnel request this year is police department replacement for retirement and an additional parks laborer. This is the final year for the increase to the employee pension contribution, so the contribution will go from 4 to 5% for 2022, and that will be the end of those incremental increases. The MMO is set to decrease for 2022. The major projects for stormwater are going to be, as listed there, Bullmar, Glen Ave, and Legion Drive. And there's also several project carryovers from 2021. I believe Rick had said that the Idlewild basin retrofits will be completed in 2021, but we're not going to actually receive the grant money to offset that until 2022. We also are still waiting for our grant receipt for the electric vehicle charging stations. And then obviously a number of stormwater projects that are listed there. We're proposing to transfer from general fund to capital reserve fund just to cover the major capital expenditures in the amount listed there, as well as debt service. And then we're proposing to transfer $850,000 from the sewer reserve fund to the sewer authority.
Okay, great. Thanks, Christine. So this is kind of just a highlight key issues, key assumptions that are in the budget. Does the board have any questions on this slide? Very good. Is there any public comment at this point?
I have a comment. I do want to question the $15 per month or per quarter sewer rate increase. And Sean, I don't know if I brought this to your attention at a sewer authority meeting or not, but there is something referred to as the Pennsylvania Sewer Rental Act, and it essentially says, states that after annual operation and maintenance expenses and debt service are paid, The township can only accumulate up to 10% of this total budget as a margin of safety. So by law, this article was written actually by Jens Damgard, who was here a number of years ago with Eckert Siemens. And it's, we're running about a 75% sewer fund balance, and this is saying by law we should only have about a $750,000 reserve balance.
Okay, so thanks for the comment, Mike. We're going to look at the sewer fund once we got to some of these other slides. So let's revisit that question there. I'm not sure you're interpreting it correctly, because my understanding is that that doesn't apply to a particular situation here, but we'll revisit it when we get to the sewer fund.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Christine, so let's go to the next slide then.
And here you'll just see a comparison of what our general fund revenue actuals were for the last several years, as well as our 2021 budget, our 2021 projected, and our 2022 budget amount as it stands currently. So you can see the 2021 projected is a little high, and that has to do with transfer tax and building permits related to the woodlands.
As well as earned income tax. We've had some more receipts in
Earned
21 that
income
might have
tax
typically been
is a little
finalized.
higher also, because we're sort of still playing catch up a little bit from 2020 as they shifted some due dates and things like that. So.
Okay. Very good. So let's go to the actual detail on the revenues then.
And so this is just listing out, any major variances or new items included in our revenues from the year before. Real estate taxes and interims we're expecting to increase a little bit as the Woodlands homes are completed and they start to sell. We'll start billing those for real estate taxes. Transfer tax revenue, again, we're expecting a number of homes to continue to sell in that development, which drives that revenue up. Earned income tax, this is expected to increase as compared to our 2021 budget, but it's not quite going to meet the level of our 2021 actuals, and that's based on data that we were provided from Keystone. Building permits, we increased that this year to sort of match what we're currently observing in permit revenue from the Woodlands development. For miscellaneous revenue, again, this year we're expecting a one-time receipt from Aqua to offset a paving project that they're doing within the township that's going to overlap with ours. And we're also, through the restructuring of the tax collector role, we're also going to observe real estate tax certification fees and miscellaneous revenue also. It's pretty negligible amount, but I wanted to include it because it's new. Fire inspection and fire alarm violations are also new to the 2022 budget. We're also expecting a grant for intersection overview cameras that the police department uses. And foreign fire and state aid pension are expected to decline just based on the current valuations and current market values that we observed in 2021. And cable TV franchise fees that we receive for services that residents have within the township, that's been declining. Cutting the cord has been common the last few years, so that we're continuing to see that this year.
Okay, let's go to the specific numbers slide. There we go.
And then this is just a comparison of the different categories from budget 2021 to 2022.
So I had a question on here, Christine. In terms of the transfer taxes, I know they're kind of all rolled up here, I believe, in the real estate taxes.
So that's actually listed, I think, in the enabling taxes.
Okay. So on the detailed sheet, it has about 1.1 million of transfer tax.
Mm-hmm.
So do we know what proportion of that is due to the woodlands?
I have
continued
included
development?
in there 100 homes is what I included additional revenue for 100 home sales within the Woodlands development on top of our normal.
So would that be half the amount? Would it be like, what's the actual kind of dollar amount we expect income-wise? Do you have a rough number for it?
I do not have it with me, but I do have it, yes.
Okay.
It's not a very large portion.
It's not a lot,
It's
so...
not a very large portion.
Okay. That's really what I'm trying to get at, is the Woodlands really driving a lot of this?
It's definitely increasing it, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's 50, yeah,
Yeah, okay.
no.
And if I could ask a question on the enabling taxes, which includes the earned income tax.
Mhm.
We're seeing a 5% increase over the last year. Do you anticipate that's going to be sustainable into the future?
Well, part of that is transfer taxes, so
Yes.
I don't think that portion of it's going to be sustainable. Once Woodlands is completed, I think we're going to see transfer tax go back
Kind of
down to a
level out.
normal rate.
But how about the earned income tax portion of that?
That sort of remains to be seen. We try to collect as much data as we can on that. It's really going to depend on the, income that's being earned by the residents that are moving into the township. So, some of the Woodlands homes are very expensive and they come with, residents who have very high incomes, which is then going to raise our earned income tax that we're getting. So that sort of still remains to be seen. And that all depends on, when a house actually sells and when, people actually move into them. So that one's a little tricky right now as that development continues.
Christine, another question. On special police services, on the revenue, obviously we have the income from the school district, I believe,
Yes.
is in there, right?
Yep.
Do we also include in that the compensation from Chester County for when we have extra duty charges to them as a result of command staff or officers
Yeah,
participating?
I believe so.
Rolled in. And have
Yeah.
we modified that so that we bill them now at this full rate of not only the officer's salary, but the benefit uplift as well? Is that in place now?
I would have to go back and revisit that one and see where we've sort of been tracking. I know that one's a little difficult of a trend right now because, through 2021, through 2020 and the first half of 2021,
Right.
we weren't seeing the normal,
Request.
functions and things like that we were billing those services for. So that's something I can go back and
It's
revisit.
just a reminder to make sure that, we agreed that as a board that that's
Mhm.
a policy to bill the county for, so I just want to make sure we included that when we look at what we expect to receive in 22 as income for special police
Okay.
services.
Mhm.
Any other questions from the board on the revenue side for the township in 22? Any questions from the public about the revenues for the township? Doug?
Sean, how come they call the employment tax and transfer tax enabling tax?
I will turn that over to staff and accountants.
That's it's the enabling tax law from Pennsylvania.
Oh, it's
All
just,
those are called enabling taxes by the state legislature.
oh, it's just, it comes from the state.
Correct. Yeah, all the township salaries come directly from the state, and that's the act that transfer taxes and earned income are under, enabling tax.
Does that include the emergency road, the LST?
No,
That's a separate act, I believe.
that's in the other budget. Specific fund for that.
Yeah, it contains the transfer tax, the earned income tax, and the local services tax is what comprise the enabling taxes, those three.
Oh, the LST, right, the emergency road, the $52 a year.
Yeah, right, the local services.
I just want to comment, but just an observation for myself on the general fund budget for revenues. If you actually look at what the pie chart's like, 2018, 2019, and 2020, so 3 years in a row, revenues were essentially flat at $16.3 million, $16.4 million. We saw a surprise this year in 21 where our actuals were a couple of $1 million more than that. Christine's explained the reasons why. We think some of that is sustainable as a result of at least the income tax side of things, and then we continue to see the benefit of additional transfer taxes and other fees associated with permits. So 22 budget at $17.3 million represents a realistic view, I believe. So, very good. Any other public comments? Margie, you have a comment on revenues?
Yes. Can you go back one slide? Please, thank you. It says that transfer tax, and this is along the same lines that John and Sean were asking about, transfer tax revenue proposed to increase. However, in the budget, when you go to the line item, it shows transfer tax is actually negative $445,000.
I think that was just my wording. I just meant like it's going to be increased higher than normal, higher than what we would typically see, and that's just my wording. I maybe should have worded it differently.
Yeah, because it was.
I just meant increased in comparison to our normal observed revenue for that line item.
That's just a very large reduction, and I would like to see the board discuss that and maybe increase that, because I took like a 10-year rear view look over our revenues and expenditures, and as a pattern, it just seems like we have a tendency to underestimate revenues and overestimate expenses, and then we typically have like a $2 million surplus than we budgeted for, and I think it throws things off.
It's a fair comment, Margie. I mean, if you look at the historic trend, $1 million seems more typical. If you look at the 2020 actual, the 21 budget assumes some increase, presumably from what we're expecting from Woodlands. Clearly, the pace of Woodlands is something that can vary a little bit in terms of the number of homes that are built. I would prefer, rather than try to fine-tune each line, I'd like the board to consider when we get through the whole general fund and look at the overall picture of what is the difference between revenues and expenses, and decide, is there within the accuracy of how we budget a reasonable expectation that that difference, which is about $700,000, could be met between either revenues that would exceed some of the budget numbers like you just pointed out, might be an upside there, or areas where expenses could be a little less than we expect because we're budgeting for something that we think we might need to do, or we estimated the cost and we may save some money versus the reality of when that expense happens. So, good point noted. Let's kind of talk about the overall difference between revenue and expenses after we look at the expenses.
And the same, I think you see it, but the same with the earned income tax, same thing. A reduction of $600,000 from this year to next year. This sounds like it's awfully aggressive. We have all.
So there is a reason for that. I think Christine explained it, that because of the pandemic, some of the 2020 revenues for earned income tax were delayed through various tax extensions and things into 21. So we got a one-time boost in 2021. And our earned income tax for 2022 is based on our Keystone assessment of it, so it's not really just a township estimate, it's based on the folks who actually collect the payments for it. So, okay, good point.
Thank you.
Okay, so if we're done with revenues, are there any other comments? If we're done with revenues, we'll go to expenses for the general fund.
Okay, and this is just going to be the same sort of picture. You'll see this throughout the presentation. Our actuals for the last several years with our 2021 budget, our 2021 projected, and our preliminary budget for 2022.
I think that, my comment on this would be just as I made a comment about the fact that the general fund revenues were flat for 3 years. See the same thing here on expenses, in that 15.5 to 16 kind of range in 18, 19, 20, actually climbing a little bit. Then we had a significant jump in 21 where we transferred millions of dollars to pay for stormwater projects and other initiatives that we had in the capital reserve fund. We haven't been able to spend all that money because all the projects, the actual payments will be next year, and Christine hit on some of those in the highlights, the first slide. What we do see, for 22, we've got an $18 million higher budget compared to the previous years. Other than 21. Just a comment. Okay, let's move on.
slide just outlines some of the, major changes or new items or, just differences from our 2021 budget to our 2022 budget. Obviously, we discussed this previously, but we're going to see a decrease to the tax collector compensation because we restructured that at the start of the year. Our contracted services, for software, we're going to be getting a very small, it's minuscule compared to some of the other ones, but we are going to be getting a discount for service interruption on our transparency portal. Our road materials is going to decrease because we had a one-time project budgeted in 2021. We do not have that in 2022. Professional services is budgeted to increase. We have some money in there for police contract negotiations, which are coming up next year, and also an electrical engineering study for the complex here at the township. Communications is projected to increase with some of the costs related to the new phone system that we're putting in. We're also going to be adding some additional computer software malware protection. In 2022, traffic signal maintenance is proposed to increase, and now this goes as an offset to the grant revenue that we discussed in the general fund revenue section. This is going to increase for some of those forensic overview cameras that the police department uses. So the grant won't cover the whole expense, but it will cover a portion of it. Road maintenance materials is projected to increase. We increased vac truck rentals as we discussed at the last capital project meeting when we tabled the vac truck purchase for 2022. And we'll have a full year of street sweeping operations observed in 2022. We're also expecting vehicle fuel to increase just based on the current fuel prices. We had budgeted that low for the last several years because they had been low. So we increased that for 2022, and then our transfer to capital reserve is actually going to be much less in 2022 compared to 2021 because most of our projects are carryover projects. So we won't be transferring anything additional for any projects.
Any questions on the expenditure slide?
I just have one. So do we have a number for the grant revenue for the traffic signal maintenance?
It's 20,000.
20,000. Okay.
Yeah, it's 20,000.
But just for transparency, I know it's not one of your bullets, Christine, because you had it in the overall slide, but obviously general fund is where our wage and salary increases occur. So those you saw the assumptions that we had in the overall slide, and there'll be an impact on the expenses on this fund.
Yep.
Any questions from the public?
Well, I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Christine, if I could drill down a bit. When the engineering costs for inspections, this is on page 35 of your detail. Okay. There's one line item there for, it's 2022 engineering costs for inspections. It's $275,000. Can you clarify what that's for?
Those are, I believe, is that under roads?
Yes, it's
Yeah,
under road
that's just
construction.
the different, I don't know if
The different stormwater projects.
Yeah, it's all the different projects going on in the township.
Oh, those are the existing ones that we're doing now? The stormwater projects?
Stormwater, existing and ongoing. Every year it's an ongoing expense.
All right, well, I'm just trying to understand. It says engineering costs.
That's a regularly budgeted, we budget that every year. It's generally the same amount also that we budget. So it's different in what, I don't know.
Yeah,
It depends on the project, what inspections it needs also.
And we have Pine Valley, the Balmer Street, all the normal projects.
And there's another line item on that page as well for the Army Corps of Engineers for professional services for $50,000. I thought we had, we contracted with them this year, and I thought they had given us all their raw data. Are we doing that again for them for next year?
Yes, because we did nothing this year. We tried to get the Army Corps to come back in, and they're not back in the office, so they basically did nothing this year.
Right,
So
so,
yeah, so we lost out on 20 and 21.
Yeah, lost 2 years.
so we had a budget item for them for last year for Army Corps of Engineers, correct?
Correct.
So we're basically moving that from this budgeted year to next year.
Yes,
Okay. So we didn't spend the 50 grand this year.
nor last year.
Okay.
That's when you see the roll-up on expenses being less than budget. One of the reasons it's less than budget is we didn't spend money on the Army Corps of Engineers this year.
Correct.
Well, at one point, they did complete a survey of the stormwater, the 30,000 feet of corrugated. They did not complete that?
It's not complete, there's another year to go. They provided us for the data that they have to date, but that's only 4/5 of the data. So it's another year to go to complete that.
So they have another phase to complete.
Correct.
What was the original contract for? I thought it was 3 years, wasn't it?
No.
It's fine.
A couple of years ago, we started that. So it was a 3-year contract.
Okay. John, you have any other questions?
Not right now.
Any questions of the public? Margie?
Yes, what's the status of the transparency portal?
We're still waiting for them to fix it. It's not something that we can control. They're looking into it. We're communicating with them.
All right, the third bullet point says road materials to decrease, and then third from the bottom says road maintenance materials
two separate
to
accounts.
increase.
One's road construction, right? One's road construction and one's road maintenance.
So what's the difference? I've asked this almost every year.
One has a paving plan and one is what the township actually does.
I'm wondering, going forward, since we bid that contract out, and it's usually, I don't know, $700,000 to $1 million a year, could we not do a line item for contracted road 5-mile paving? Because it's
Well, it's split between general fund and liquid fuels. So there's no one account that comes out of it.
it doesn't show, I mean, we're contracting out just like we contract out for other things, and it'll show a line item. And so we contract out every year $800,000 for those services.
But was it two separate projects, like the road resurfacing that you did with liquid fuels was one contract, the boot road restriping that was...
Boot Road came out, yeah, that would come out of the other funds. And some years...
Not just one bucket, one project.
Right. And some years, the paving comes out of liquid fuels and general fund, depending on the cost of the contract.
Yeah.
So it's multiple.
Liquid fuels is just really where we get the state grant.
Yeah.
And then
Make sure that's used for that specific purpose.
Right.
We may have other needs beyond that that are carried here in road construction projects.
And we could use liquid fuels for the Boot Road project.
Right.
Yeah.
and on this slide, curious, what
So,
is...
Margie, do you understand what the difference is now? I just want to make sure you're clear because we've just spent time explaining it.
Yeah, it confuses me every budget year because it's very opaque to me.
Okay.
What is the purpose of the engineering study? What is that for?
So the board is interested in understanding what it would take to move for a full EV fleet here. So whether it's all police vehicles, pool vehicles, some of the streets equipment over time. So a 10, 15-year project. If we replace equipment and vehicles with electric vehicles down the road, how are we going to maintain servicing those, charge them, everything else?
Okay.
And so the electrical engineering study is going to look at what feeds come into this complex, what power demand a kind of all-electric fleet might need, and give us a conceptual design of what it will look like if the future board decides to invest in that.
Okay, so this is though for the municipal complex. Does that mean buildings as well?
Yeah, it would look at buildings too. We can
Okay.
ask them to include, if we want to electrify the heat in a building, how would that look at the overall loads, et cetera.
And is there an estimated budgeted cost for that? Just curious.
There was 15, 20 we had,
Was it like 13 or?
I thought it was up to 20.
20 maybe, 22.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, it was like 20,000.
And then also the police contract negotiation, what
Yeah,
do
so
we
the
have
board
budgeted for
wants
that?
to be able to retain labor council.
Oh, I think that's a great idea.
It also wants to be able to maybe have some data analysis done. It It also may have to pay the cost of arbitration. So we need to have a fund available in our budget to deal with whatever happens with the police.
Oh, I'm not arguing at all.
I was
think
explaining it.
It should have been done 5 years ago. Again, is there an amount that's budgeted, or is?
I don't know what it would do.
I can't recall offhand.
I think
It's
it's
$125,000.
125, and the balance then would be the engineering study.
Okay, that's all I have for this one. Thank you.
Thanks, Margie. Next slide, please, Christine.
Okay, and this is just a comparison of the different department levels, 2021 budget to 2022 budget.
Can I ask a question here on the public safety, on expenses? Again, drilling down just a bit here, on page 23, your detail, there's a contribution there for fire pension. It's 80158 is the code for it.
Yes.
Can you explain a little bit what that is for?
That is the expense offset to the foreign fire revenue that we received.
Oh, the foreign fire?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep,
Gotcha.
that's just the expense portion of it going out.
Gotcha, all right. Very good, thank you.
Any other questions from the board? So obviously, we still have our ongoing discussion to be resolved on our volunteer fire company contribution and GFAC. So once we've got through the overall budget presentation, we can come back to whatever's still a moving part with respect to Christine's. We've completed the budget for us. But that would be one of the items that's outstanding under public safety. But right now, Christine, you have in this budget that we hopefully will approve for advertisement the same amounts as we currently have paid.
Yes, the same amount that we had either already paid or will be paying in 2021, depending on when those dates are.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm sorry. So just back on that one, were there any public questions or comments on the overall expenses by the different departments that are listed? Gina?
The operating expenses, it's a good thing it's down, but I'm just wondering why.
You mean the operating transfers?
Oh, that's yeah.
That is just the transfer from general fund capital reserve. It's less in 2022 because we're not transferring for all those stormwater projects that we had transferred for in 2021. So that's why.
Thank you.
Just on that, at an earlier meeting, we approved the American Rescue Act funds to pay for our new stormwater projects in 22. So we had 3 particular initiatives. They were for stormwater. They were listed on the original first slide, and they're going to be paid from, which you'll see later, out of the new fund. So therefore, we had the fortunate situation where we didn't need to fund these critical stormwater projects by transferring money from our general fund revenue for this budget to capital reserves. Great, thanks. Oh, Doug, you have a question?
Yes, may I ask you a question about the library funding, please?
Library is flat at $20,000.
Okay. Is it still all going to the borough this year, next year?
It's to the Westchester Library. We don't make a contribution to the county library system.
Okay, so the Exton branch is part of the county. Do they get greater funding than the borough library?
I don't know.
I don't know. That's a county function. I don't know that.
Any other questions? Okay, I think is that the last slide for the general fund?
Yes, that's the last slide for the general fund.
So maybe we should, just take what is, from your perspective, still unresolved issues that the board has not given you a specific approval for. And we just talked about the Goshen Fire Company and GFAC, the ambulance contribution. Are there any other issues from your perspective around how to finalize the budget?
The only things that I had to discuss for general fund, and this would also affect sewer fund, we had talked about possibly waiving the transfer to retiree health this year. That would be general fund. And I also have, Casey and Chris and I had talked earlier about maybe needing to change our bonding requirements with the new structure for the tax collector, because we're going to be bringing some of that stuff in-house, and as to whether we need to have additional employees bonded for that. So that would affect general fund.
I noticed you had quite a lot for bonding insurance.
Well, this
Was
year,
that intended to cover those additional staff members?
what is in the budget right now? No, this would be additional. What is in the budget right now is just bonding for the tax collector,
Okay.
myself, and for Casey.
And the tax collector bond is only issued once
For
during their
4
term,
years.
so it's the first year of their term.
So that's what
that's
that
why it's
$5,000
Yes.
is.
Mhm.
Correct, yes. Where we are an annual
Yeah.
for ours.
Well, we also have to have a discussion on the board, which we'll have before the board workshop in December on the salaries for township manager and police chief.
Yeah.
So that still has to be resolved.
So are we gonna have the discussion about the post-retirement?
Yeah, let's do, I mean, so
So that we can-
you raised that question. My understanding, great from Jen's here too, is that the benefit is not utilized to the actuarial level that we've been funding it. And therefore, the board has an option to consider whether what you have in the budget as a transfer to post-retiree health is necessary or not this year. And then we could, certainly for this year, not move that money and still be well funded for the actual level of usage of that fund.
Can you explain it a little bit in terms of numbers? Can you put some numbers to this?
Sure.
So for the general fund, the amount is about $171,000. Basically, I mean, actuarially speaking, we're not fully funded in OPEB because, the actuary is going to look at it that every employee that works here is going to use that benefit, when in actuality, meeting the requirements that are necessary to obtain that benefit are pretty difficult. So we don't see many employees actually being able to utilize that benefit. So while we're not actually fully funded, based on our actual usage, that funding isn't as necessary this year. So I know we had talked about trying to get the deficit down, and that is an option for this year.
And by not funding it, it would not affect our...
No, I mean, obviously, we couldn't continue to do that. That would, eventually really bring down that funding ratio. But as a one-time thing, it's
Is there any way to estimate what the funding ratio should be for the actual usage of this benefit? So for example, if we were fully funded, that would be 100%. But 10 years of history says we only ever get half of it used. So really a funding ratio of 60% would have covered whatever the demand is. Is there any way to calculate that, certainly for next year?
I think that it would be prudent to bring the actuary in on that question. I mean, we all know what the reality is, but I don't want to sort of like steamroll his assumptions.
Yeah, I suppose that'll be a special calculation for him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I support taking out, if you want to use the word holiday for this year and not fund post-retiree benefit. It's certainly, if it's dead money that's not being used in the sense of we're overfunding an account, why would we do it? And we've got so many other demands. So what do other board members think?
Favorite.
What do you think?
I tend to go on the conservative side and say it should be at least partially funded.
It is funded to up to 100%. It is certainly partial. You say take some of this, or
It's whatever the actuary comes up with is what we should be putting in.
okay. So he has a little different view. He believes we should go with what the actuary says, even though that's 100% of everybody taking the benefit, and that's not the reality.
It's not necessarily the actuarial calculation. You should check with the actuary and see what his assumptions are.
So that's a good point. So Casey, we certainly have time between now and December or whatever to ask the actuary what his assumptions are around the usage of this Okay, so we're asking to get that information, then we'll make a decision at that time on how this the way the assumptions are. And I'm not ready for volunteer fire company discussion right now. Maybe at the end we'll come through everything.
I kind of like to get some more information, quite frankly, before we...
You go to that.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
Just a quick comment on the OPEB benefits. I recently read something from Radnor where they had the Delaware Valley Health Trust, is that our administrator of our health insurance? Anyway, they asked them to survey the municipalities that they service, and they service about 130 municipalities. They surveyed 67 of them, and out of the 67 municipalities they surveyed, only 12 offered OPEB benefits to their employees, all 12 to the police department, and then only 6 of those municipalities to non-uniform workers. So just wanted to put that out there.
Okay, thank you.
Knowledge. Thank you.
Any other questions on the general fund expenses? Great, thanks, Christine. I think we're ready to move on to the next fund. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry, I have one more comment to make about the general fund. So it does go back really to one of the comments Margie made earlier around how the actual outturn comes out different than what we originally budgeted for our revenues and expenses. So if you actually look at the 21 budget, or what we expected the balance to be at the end of this year, therefore carried forward to 2022, our original assumption had a decrease down to 8.6 million based on the assumptions that we had going in. And all we can do is base a budget on assumptions. But it's actually going to be closer to 12.3 million, assuming our projected numbers here in November are going to be fairly close. So it does show you how significant changes to both the revenue side and expense side can impact the actual outturn to a budget. Because I remember as we went into this year, we were over $2.5 million negative on this fund. We're still going to be negative, but not. Point taken about a budget is just that, an estimate of what we have.
Can I make a suggestion here? Since we're going to have more than end up in the general fund with about 3.6 million more than we anticipated this time last year, to amend the 2021 budget and take 3 million of that, allocate it into a dedicated stormwater fund. We save ourselves the professional fees of a fee analysis next year by our engineering firm, and it's $3 million we didn't plan on having, and there it is. It funds the stormwater.
So thank you for the suggestion. We did get the windfall of 1.2 million from the federal government. That was great. That certainly wasn't something we anticipated. We had half a conversation about what's still to come when we get the full Army Corps information and HRG's analysis of it. We're actually going to have to have a discussion with the board around how we fund way more than $3 million worth of improvements in the next 5 to 10 years. So rather than move that suggestion forward at this point, let's just park it and then have a bigger discussion. So go to the sewer fund, please, Christine.
Okay, so same slide for sewer fund revenues. Our actuals for the last several years are 2021 budget, 2021 projected, and 2022 budget. I'm just noting here that our sewer rates in these incorporated in these revenues are including a $15 per quarter for residents, and that comes out to be a 14.29% increase for commercials. And that's included in the 2022 revenue numbers. Did you want to do this fund as a whole?
Oh, well, I was just thinking whether I wanted to make a comment here. Okay. But does anybody else want to make a comment? Obviously, you see here the fact that we have raised rates both in 2019 and 2022 plan. And again, just to remind everyone, this is all to do with the substantial investment that we've made in our assets here in the township to service not only West Goshen, but other municipalities too. And Mike's with us here, the work that he and Dave and the team have all done to move these projects along, to really revamp this whole facility is a real you've ever had a chance to go there, it's fantastic. So we're at the end of the first wave here. We're looking for some really cool successes with regard to phosphorus removal with the latest project that we're commissioning. And this is the right way to look after what is publicly owned, and that is to maintain it and invest in it and make it fit for the future for us and for the residents that are going to live here. So I'm fully behind this approach.
Yeah, I'm just going to piggyback off of that. It's traditionally irresponsible not to maintain infrastructure. If you let it go, then when it becomes a crisis situation, then it costs double, triple to fix it. So if we're going to maintain a sewer system, as well as stormwater and anything else the government does, you have to spend the money to do it. So this is the only way, I think, to do it correctly.
Thanks, Christine.
Okay, and so here are expenses for 2022 in the sewer fund. The only real notable here is we're still seeing, chemical and sludge expenses elevated, and that's in relation to the new COMEG system and our transfer of $850,000 to the sewer reserve fund for the sewer authority, and that's a little bit less than the 2021 transfer.
Tina, I think you asked at the previous meeting about were the operating expenses going to increase as a result of starting COMAG. I think I saw it in the meeting minutes at least that I read, so the answer is yes. Okay.
And that's it for the sewer fund, so I don't know if you want to
Yeah, I actually had two things
Okay.
that, having said, so I talked to Mike about a couple of the line items in this that I do feel we can make an adjustment on.
I have
I get them wrong, Mike, to correct me here. On plant maintenance, Mike had budgeted $230,000, and I believe we talked about 200 being acceptable for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then on, so that was account, you know what it is.
Yeah, I have it written down.
And then the other one was on electric and gas within the collection system.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the pump stations spend electric usage, and I believe we continue with our fixed price contract with the energy supply side of our constellation, so that'll be fixed. So we talked about a budget of $120,000 instead of $140,000, so about $50,000 less on expenses.
Yeah, I have
And then of course we have the same question like you already raised on the transfer to carrying out.
Yes, and that could be another potential change. And then, bonding additional staff for that would very minorly impact the sewer fund. So,
one other point on the sewer fund, I want to make a public comment about the trials and tribulations that Mike has had in recruiting and retaining staff for this facility. So over the 2019-2020 period, he had 3 vacancies that he filled. He also had 3 people leave. The 3 people that had filled the original vacancies, they've all left because the wage rate and compensation packages available to them elsewhere are higher than our historic rates that we pay for these positions. That's a problem because this plant needs skilled, capable people to operate it. Mike and others are training people only to see them leave after a few months, year or so, for a few dollars an hour more elsewhere. And we need to make sure that we can pay and retain people the appropriate wage for what is being asked of them in these jobs. So I just want to make that statement for the record. Any other questions or comments from the board on the sewer? Anything from the public? Okay, on to the next one, please, Christine.
okay, waste and recycling. There's not really much change here in the waste and recycling. We do see our performance grant for recycling continue to decline, and that's just the way the current market is. And you're seeing the proposed $10 a quarter increase in those 2022 revenues that are listed there in comparison with our past actuals and budget numbers.
Is there a reason why? I mean, is it just that it's flat, or have we actually seen a decline in revenue on?
The performance grant,
So I'm just looking at the top line. Is that kind of holding flat as we build out more homes, more people come on, or whatever else? Is the fact that it's still flat, the fact that we're losing on the recycling cost, or?
for the 2020, what are you
Just
comparing?
I'm looking at the trend over time. So our revenue through 21 projected before we take an increase is flat.
Yeah, we
So I know
haven't
we've been adding
increased
some homes in
sewer.
the township, so, you know, some additional revenue from people paying a trash fee.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't, I don't think, had that many new trash accounts that were added. We haven't raised the fee in a very long time, so that's part of the reason why it has stayed flat. That in conjunction, the only other real revenue that we have in that account is our performance grant that we get from the state for recycling, and that's been declining, so they sort of offset each other there a little bit, so.
And just a reminder, there's an age-restricted portion in Woodlands that is private trash service, so we do not provide service nor receive any revenue.
Yeah.
How many of the homes in Woodlands will we be sewer trash revenue from?
Sewer, 100%, trash, 589 minus 230. About 300 plus will be new trash
So
service.
60%?
Yep.
Okay. Doug, you have a comment?
I guess that was the last trash increase in 2010, Casey? 2010? It went from 55 to 85.
I mean, we did, just to remind everyone, we did talk about the $10 increase that is proposed in the 22 budget, and how when you look through the 5-year life of the contract and the change year on year for the expenses for the collection, that $10 did not cover the full amount. So we, as a board, will have to look at a future increase within the life of this contract. It was more like $18 or $20 was needed to cover the full increases in costs we're going to experience over the next 5 years.
So does that 2022 budget include the increase?
Yeah.
That's all it is?
That's all it generates.
Okay, next slide.
Okay, so here are the expenses for the waste and recycling fund. Really, the only change here is the contract. The new contract is, 90% of our expenses in this fund, so.
And about how much did they go up per year in the 5-year contract?
I think it's
3%.
It's 3%.
3%
But the
a
first
year?
year includes toters, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The first year includes toters, and then it's 3% a year after that.
That's actually less than what the cost of the CPI is right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We bid at the right time.
Yeah.
We actually made out on that one, I guess.
We did.
Any public comments or questions?
The blue cans are pretty nice. The new cans.
Well, the bill ones are pretty good too.
Unless you have kids that put cycling in the wrong one.
I know, that's the only problem is trash. There's trash on the top, though.
Any other questions on waste and recycling? Okay, thanks.
Okay, so liquid fuels, again, not a large fund, not a lot of activity. The only revenue that we've received here is our state grant, which we're, based on what we've received from PennDOT, looks to be about the same in 2022 as what we received in 2021. So, and that's just preliminary estimates, but that's what we have right now.
Okay.
Is there any projection available as to how the electric conversion to electric vehicles is going to affect this?
It's going down.
Yeah, it's going to affect it.
We saw like a 10% increase for 2021, right?
Yep.
But is there a projection as to how much.
I know the state was trying to study that item to see if a different type of, get rid of the fuel tax and go to a per mile tax. That's just a recommendation. They have not given us any indication.
But if the price of fuel continues to go up, do we also receive a benefit from that?
No, it's a set.
So it's strictly
Fuel
just
tax is a set amount.
set amount, so it doesn't, not based on the dollar amount of the gallon? Okay.
Unless people drive less because of the increase.
And the pandemic obviously put a crimp in revenues too. So. Next.
Okay, and so these are expenses for liquid fuels. Again, all we pay for out of this fund is our paving project. We are estimating to pay 5.64 miles of road with a total project cost of about $900,000. 730 of that is going to be coming from liquid fuels based on the money that we are receiving and our current fund balance, and then the balance will be spent from the general fund. And the general fund portion is to offset the money that we're receiving from Aqua. So, yeah.
Has the increase in oil prices been factored into the calculation of the asphalt cost?
Yeah, we do that every year.
Even using like what's happened in the last month?
Yep.
So that aqua reimbursement then, does that cover all of
That
it?
covers the general fund portion of it,
That's
yeah.
completely,
Correct.
okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So for paying the contractor, Alan Myers or Duraco, then why aren't we using everything we get? So if we get 760 from the state, why aren't we using all 760 to pay the contractor? Why are we spending less than we have?
We get 760.
Well, we budgeted 760, we only got 60.
Yeah, let's
That was the bid.
That's what the project came in at. I mean, we're estimating the costs now, but we don't know what they'll actually be when we bid them, and I don't know what
Yeah.
we'll decide.
The low bid came in under, and we had other bids over. So the number we put in was kind of the average.
He was just asking about the price of oil again, asphalt costs. You know, it's a crystal ball because October's numbers just came out for shale oil production in the U.S. and they're already back at the record level. So as the price of oil goes up, more supply comes on again. I don't know what the price will be in summer of next year, but it's best budget what you know now.
Well, when we award the bid, when we bid it and award it, from the time we bid it to the time we pay the bill, whatever oil does in between, we're legally obligated because we're using liquid fuels. The contractor has an escalator clause.
Yeah.
I've seen us get hit $65,000, $70,000 upcharge if the cost of oil goes up in between that time.
Yeah.
Then
Okay.
why wouldn't we pay that then out of the general fund and use liquid fuels for other costs that we have in roads? Because we can use that for winter snow chemicals and equipment purchases, and we can use that account for a lot of other expenses. So if we're taking a hit by paying,
You're going to pay that one way or the other. If we don't follow the state guidance or the state law where we have to do the escalator, the contractors, when they bid it, are going to raise the price. That keeps the price down.
I thought you were saying we have to pay that because we were using liquid fuels.
You have to pay it because we're using liquid fuels, but if you don't pay it, or you don't offer that with liquid fuels, the contractors are going to give themselves a safety and raise the price. That's why PennDOT makes everybody use that to keep a more level field.
Okay.
I mean, we've had it, one year we had it where it came in where the oil price dropped and we actually got a discount.
Yeah. Okay, next thought, please, Christine.
So capital reserve, We already discussed some of this in the key highlights. We're expecting 2 grant receipts that were budgeted originally in 2021. They're going to be carried over to 2022. And obviously our transfers from general fund and restricted parks fund. But other than that, there's not really any revenues that we observe in the capital reserve fund.
Any questions from the board?
Thank you for the ARP.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Uncle John now.
Okay.
And our capital reserve fund expenses. You can see the 2022 budget is very similar to the 2021 budget, and that's because majority of those projects are carryovers, with a little bit of difference in our capital purchase items. We are slated to do several park improvement projects. They're listed at the bottom. We previously discussed them during the capital request meeting.
Christina, just on the projects for the parks, when we talked about funding those, we talked about using restricted parks.
Yes, and that's where this money will come from for those. Yeah.
So the balance in that account was close to $1 million, but not quite there. And then I think when you added these up, it's close to using all that money if we do everything that's listed, if I'm correct. So I would just like to ask the board that the splash pad was a significant part of that project. At the last meeting, Rick was talking about the fact that we would have to manage the water using a stormwater management approach that is not legally acceptable to go into sanitary sewer. So we don't have an estimate of that cost yet. And then at the same time, we also had a presentation from Chris who was explaining, the option to progress a grant. And we passed the motion to push forward with the engineering.
Yeah, we were going to work on some more details, I believe.
So we did approve money for Carol and engineering to do any work.
That's correct. There was a motion, and then after the discussion.
I thought it was a motion.
Yeah. So I mean, just thinking out loud, my position on the splash pad is I think it's a good idea if we can get a grant for it. If we can't get a grant and we need to spend the money with stormwater facility improvement as well, it would become quite an expensive project on its own. So
Yeah,
I think
we
the
need
board
some more
needs to
information.
revisit it.
A little more research.
December or January when, we would need to revisit that.
Yeah, and there's an opportunity, just like with the skate park and improvements at Lambert Park, the township applied for a county grant and then used that as a match for a state grant. So the township actually was put out about 20% of the overall project. If the board was so willing, we could do it might take 16 months to get those 2 grants lined up. But if the board's willing to not postpone anything, but slow it down a little bit so we can apply for both of those programs, we could possibly have 80% of the funding grant funded for the splash pad.
Didn't you also say that we're supposed to get another influx of restricted parks funds next year from?
Well, it's constant. Every time they do a building permit, we get $2,500 per household, so.
Okay.
So I think in terms, so obviously the board will keep working with the overall approach here. I mean, I think for the budget, Christina's, we can budget it and show that that's where the funds would come
And if anything,
from.
it'll just be a carryover
The budget's
for
a live document, we'll revisit it in Q1 or Q2, whenever it makes sense to look at whether we're doing this project or not, and we'll understand the situation. Any other board questions on expenses?
Well, let me ask you a question on the playground at Cloud Park. Just talking about relocating the current structure. What's going on there? That has to be replaced in a couple of years anyway. I mean, what's the game plan for that? I mean, that's a $50,000 expense as well.
We have some flooding issues caused by the soft wood chip surfacing. Goes down and floods up an inlet in a resident's backyard. So Rick and I were looking at it, and the obvious was to put soft surfacing in there, which is very expensive, which is why we don't typically put it in. And then we looked at the life of the equipment. It's really not worth putting the soft surfacing in. We'd rather just the equipment's gotta be replaced anyway in a couple of years. Take this year, move the equipment up to the other end where it won't impact the stormwater.
I'm just trying to understand, I mean, is it worth doing this now, or is it best to just wait until 2025, when the whole thing has to get replaced
Well,
anyway?
We're having flooding issues caused by the wood mulch.
Problem is, if we have another flooding event, that mulch clogs a private individual's stormwater inlet and causes flooding, we're liable.
How much mulch is getting washed away that's plugging up a storm drain into the property?
Quite a bit.
Several
When
cubic
we
yards
get
at least.
when we get the 100-year storms, it washes right through there.
We get those 100-year storms every other week.
Every other,
Yeah.
yeah, 10 days.
So it's always a park playground equipment problem, but are we solving what's going to happen when it's just open surface there and now you've got a channel being eroded through with dirt from our playground going into his property? And
Well, no, once we move the playground, it'll be a lawn again. So once we get the lawn established, then you won't have that.
You will have the blockage of the chips being moved.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
Stabilized
And
grass.
when I looked into putting the solid surfacing in, it was I think $25,000 or $30,000 just to put the surfacing in around the old equipment,
Yeah.
which didn't make sense.
Okay.
But I have a quick comment about the splash pad then. So the plan all along was to sort of do it at the same time as putting in the restroom, right? Because everything would be sort of done at the same time. If we're not moving ahead with that, then why are we moving ahead with the restroom renovation?
Good question. So, we know the basketball court needs fixing, right? We have the signs that have been put off for 5 years now. We put a digital sign in. The playground, the restroom was the fact that we have had issues with only being one restroom available during events, etc. And this was going to be a good opportunity to put the work together in one go. So to actually point that it makes sense to do this, we'll wait until we know exactly how the splash pad situation is going to work out.
It's a valid question.
I understand, and I remember your comment from the last time we had this, that, you know, if we have an amenity that's unusable, it's better to fix that amenity first before putting a new one. And I completely understand and to a large extent agree with that statement. At the same time, I'm looking at, like you said, we have about almost $1 million in restricted parks. This is an amenity that would be really, I think, important to the community. It's something that a lot of people want, and it's not just, you know, something fun and something pretty to look at, but we have an issue, a socioeconomic issue in West Goshen Township where we're having these ridiculously warm summers. And I'm hearing from residents all the time that they have no place to take their children without paying a membership fee every summer to cool off. I look at it actually as a public health issue. It's not just having some playground equipment, it's after we've been through a really difficult time in the pandemic, taking this money that we've gotten from building out the township and putting it to use that people are going to be able to see. It's something that I would guess, I would put money on, if you had to ask people of this township whether they wanted the cloud park equipment and the new sign and the basketball court renovation or a brand new family bathroom and a splash pad, what they would choose.
Yeah, I mean, I agree actually. What I'm trying to understand is the splash pad a $700,000 project or $750,000 project because of the stormwater needs and we don't get any grants for it and we're using everything we have in our restricted parks other than these other things? Or is it a $600,000 project because of when we finish up the design of the stormwater and the whole thing, and we can get $300,000 of grants? It seems like a much different outcome from a dollar perspective.
As far as timing and holding on to that money, I know that we only have about 3 years to spend it. I'm concerned that by putting this large expense off, which would eat up, I think, a lot of that money, and waiting until we sort of go down these various avenues, there's a chance that we could surpass that time.
Yeah, I mean, there's a chance. I mean, it also would have to have developers come back and say, give me back my money. They have to request not all come from Woodland in the last 2 years. I mean, it's a good question. I mean, I think we have the right approach, which is let's get more information from the build out to design. We need to understand what stormwater costs are going to be, and we need to understand the options of the grant funding. We said we're going to budget it and keep it in as a project at the current cost, and let's see how it plays out.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need to get some research here, some engineering research, come up with a game plan. And then we have an idea what it's going to cost, and we go from there.
I wanted to comment on the capital, just the discrepancy between the detailed capital sheets and the roll-up for the equipment, I believe. One of the police cars was a little higher, at 48,000.
Yes.
So did you incorporate that in the final numbers in this budget, or is
Yeah,
it? Okay.
that's in there.
Thank you. Any other questions on expenses from the board? Any public comments or questions on expenses for the capital reserve fund? Margie, you got your hand up.
I've brought this up in years past. It really troubles me that we have this separate fund, restricted parks fund, and it is not part of our annual budget. We've had about $350,000 of revenue generated into that fund this year, but that doesn't show anywhere in this budget. We'll probably have another revenue stream of $350,000 to $400,000 into it next year. Again, it's nowhere in the budget. And I think it would be easier to look at all these really great ideas that we have in mind to use these funds for. And I think it just gets muddied when you look, well, it's coming from this fund, so we see it come into this capital reserve, but we don't have the budget to look at. I don't know why it even goes into this capital reserve fund. I think we should keep it separate, and I think it should be part of this budget. There's $1 million that we don't have included in this budget.
I think that was brought up last year. What did we say? I thought that we said that we did want to include it in the...
Well, I know Sean and I have talked about this a couple times. It's not a fund that we're required to budget because there's no activity there. It is observed every month on the treasurer's report of how much money is in there, and it is listed in the capital reserve fund as a transfer in. So you are seeing the offset of that expense, but there's no activity. There's no activity there that we would be spending the funds directly from that account or anything like that. And that's why it's not considered a major governmental fund.
So we wouldn't be spending it from restricted parks?
No, we wouldn't.
The monies would be transferred from restricted parks.
Right.
What about Margie's point, though, that there is a potential revenue stream that, just the very conversation we had, how much are we going to get next year, and how big is this fund, and are we completing the whole thing, because we can only see the $1 million now, or are we going to get $200,000 of money?
It's impossible to get, and that's why it was never sort of included in here, and it's going to be a very short-term fund at this point, because once Woodlands is done, the township is essentially built out, and we're not going to be receiving any more open space.
Snapshot of what we have in the fund as part of next year, like as part of budget process going forward.
I mean, we could ask Christine or finance staff to prepare a memo that says, here's what's in the treasurer's report that we're going to look at in a minute, and here's what we think we might get from Woodlands, and this is what you've got available to spend on the project. I mean, it's pretty short, right? So,
yeah.
But we did talk about what we were doing yesterday.
Yes, the restricted parks, Casey said that you have to spend the money in 3 years. Is that, when does the 3 years start? When it's
From receipt.
Okay, so
From the day we get the check.
So every amount of money that comes in is tracked for 3 years.
Right, is it each individual transaction of revenue that's tracked, or is it just?
It's just the.
I think the law changed on that. I think the MPC was changed, that it's not, you're not required to go back.
So what happens if it's not spent in the 3 years?
Doug, I just said that the law has changed. So the MPC used to say that if it wasn't spent in 3 years, the developer could request it back, but I believe that section of the MPC has changed. I don't know when the MPC changed versus when the fees, the $1 million that's in there, when it was okay. But developers typically don't ask for it back. I mean, you can ask for them to waive that as well. But. But I don't believe that the funding that has been put in there through Greystone has been paid for the 3-year window.
Okay, thanks. Question in the back?
Gentlemen.
I prepared comments about park improvements at Barker. Do you want me to wait till the end for the public, or?
No, this is a great time to bring them up. We're right in the midst of
Okay.
park improvements.
All right. My name's Jared Easy. I live right off Mallard Road in West Goshen. I'm here tonight because I want, hopefully, to persuade the board to improve Barker Park and make it less sedentary for families that use it and for the campers that use it during the summer. The Glen Acres neighborhood has exploded with children in recent years. Enrollment in Glen Acres increased enough that obviously you've heard they had to be redistricted because they could not accommodate the numbers. On average, Glen Acres has 470 students that live in the surrounding area. Barker Park is the primary park for the majority of these families, along with Cooper Smith if you're crossing Westchester Pike. My wish is that the township will start by adding at least a basketball court at Barker. Aside from the swings and the playground equipment, there are no zones of engagement to get families and young people moving. And I talked to Mr. Lear, I hope I'm saying his name right. Barker has 100 kids on average enrolled during the summer. 4 of them are my children. It would open up countless options for the kids during the summer, for the school year. To be honest, it's hard to not feel that there's an inequity in the parks, especially when you hear about discussions of splash pads at West Goshen, which is one of my favorite parks. And when you visit Lamford Park and see the skate park and tennis courts and fenced-in dog park, and then you have the luxury of leaving that parking lot and seeing a brand new elementary school. Now, I know the township isn't responsible for the frustration that some parents have had with Glen Acres and the length of time it took to get renovations scheduled. But my hope is that township remembers that Barker Park is there, and there's a ton of kids that will use it, every day. And I just don't want it to be forgotten. And my kids will use a splash pad. We'll be at West Goshen. I think it's a wonderful idea. Currently, we go into the borough to use that one. But we're losing kids to East Goshen Camp, people in our neighborhood, because there's better options. And I'm just hoping that we can kind of, maybe we're in a generous mood with the budget, and we can find some little extra for old Barker.
Thanks for your comments. Those are great comments. We certainly appreciate hearing from you.
No. We'd have to study it. A large portion of Barker Park is floodplain. Cannot build a basketball court in floodplain, so we can take a look at it and see if there's a place that could be built, but I can't guarantee that that's the case.
Was your basketball court just one idea, or are you just looking at
amenity
in general, how you could improve that park?
One of the problems, a couple of years ago, we were supposed to put a structure down there, a climbing rock. We purchased the rock under Coast Guards and all. And all summer, we couldn't get the foundation in because it's so wet down there. And that rock, because we had already purchased it, is actually at South Concord Park because we needed somewhere to put it. It's just the area down there is so bad for construction. And like Rick said, it's mostly floodplain. So trying to get something in there is very hard.
So I think, we're not trying to be negative. Just want to take your suggestion under consideration. We obviously have some work to do here around where we spend some money that we have to use for parks in general. We've got some ideas we've already been working on, and you've made a comment about taking a broader look, and we can make sure we think about that before we commit to projects.
Let me just follow up on it. We've been exchanging emails here at one point.
Yeah, I bothered John.
Pardon?
I bothered you about it, though.
That's okay. That's all right. That's why we're here. But then, why don't we get together a meeting? I asked you, please tell me a time that's good for you. We can sit down with Mr. Craig, the township engineer, and go over the plans, the prints there, and look at if there's any possibility for a basketball court there. Let's do it. So let me know what your schedule's like, and then we'll set up a meeting time.
Thank you.
Okay?
Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions about capital reserve on the township for the budget for 22? Very good. Thank you. Christine, next one.
So this is the American Rescue Plan. This is the money that we received through the American Rescue Plan Act. We received our first allotment in 2021, and we're projected to receive the same amount in 2022. And you know, the only other revenue in this account is going to be interest. So that's it for this one. And then our expenses, we've already touched on them a couple times during this presentation. It's going to be the 3 stormwater projects, Bomar, Glen Ave, and Legion Drive, that are going to be paid out of this one. So I will just point out that the estimated costs for 2022 are less than the requirement for a single audit. So we do not have that budgeted in here. It's $750,000 spent in 1 year. Will require a single audit for these funds. That's just the way that it's written. But the costs estimated for this year aren't anticipated to hit that. So.
Rick, does this mean these 3 projects are going to be in a construction phase in the winter next year? Well, I'm just looking at that spend profile. It means you're either doing the work and you haven't been billed, or if the work's underway or the work's complete, you haven't been billed in 22. What do you think the timeline is for these 3 projects?
Well, we're hoping to have construction done in 2022.
Yeah, these 3 projects, we're hoping to be bidding them in February, March, at the latest.
Yeah, I believe it's broken down in there by construction costs and design costs in those numbers.
So it's possible we could spend all of this 1.2 million if it ends up being half of these 3 projects in 22. We're just budgeting it at 540. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. Any public comments or questions about use of the American Rescue Plan Fund?
Well, can I just, let me just make sure I understand that. From what we're looking at, we're looking at $543,000 for the 3 stormwater projects. So that would leave us $659,000 left from $1.2 million, correct?
The project's going to cost 1.2, right? But we're only spending 540 of it in 22 because the bills don't come in and get fully paid until early 23.
Oh, I see. Okay, so they'll go into 2023.
Yeah,
right.
Just like we've carried over projects into 22 that were like Sunset Hollow and
right. Okay.
Pine Valley.
And the rules for these funds are that they need to be allocated within a certain time frame?
Just by, I think we have a contract at the end of 25. Is it 24? Okay.
So
the end of 24, they have to be contracted to be built through 25 then. And we'll be done.
Okay. Any public comment on American Rescue Plan Fund?
Is it too soon to know if we'll be the recipient of any of the infrastructure monies?
Way too soon. We actually had that discussion today.
Yeah, we talked about it with the sewer authority and we'll do the same thing for the township as well.
After this is used up, does the stormwater fee then start, like in 24 or 25?
So remember, we're getting another tranche of this money in 22. So just as we showed, I think on the previous slide, we're going to get more revenue in 22. So we'll have to see what priority projects we have that we want to use those funds for. It could be stormwater projects, most likely. I think they will be, given, as you already know, with having a look at the corrugated metal pipe systems that we have and the concerns that we have there, plus the work that Rick's done with the Army Corps over the years to look at other parts of the township that have got some risk in them. So in my opinion, it's quite likely that stormwater will be the priority projects that we'll use the second tranche of this money for. But then in addition to that, once we get the report and the study, the assessment completed and the cost estimates done on stormwater in its entirety across the township, we may have, and I'll make the number up, $10 to $15 million worth of projects identified as needing to be done sooner rather than later to avoid emergency repairs, collapsed roads, collapsed backyards with a much higher cost to repair or replace at that point. So this board will have to make a decision in '22, once it gets that assessment, as to whether we do what the sewer authority did, which is to borrow money, fix those projects in a 5-year period, say, and get over this issue about we've got a lot of failing stormwater systems, and then pay that money back over whatever it is, a 20-year loan or bond issue. And then, at that point, we'll have to decide, well, how do we pay for that? Is it a stormwater fee or is it a property tax increase? So that's a big conversation that we're going to have, in my opinion, next year. Certainly in the near term, we're lucky that this ARP has given us ability to balance both the general fund and get some serious projects done in the next couple of years. That's my opinion. If the board has a different opinion,
So aside from these funds, is the street sweeping expenses being absorbed by the general fund?
It is for this 22, yes. But we don't know when and if we buy a second street sweeper and need to fully comply with the permit or buy a vacuum truck, how we do that. The capital equipment, in my opinion, can be rolled into a loan or a bond issue that I just described. But the ongoing operating costs, we don't know whether they can be absorbed within the general fund because of increasing revenues to the township from the woodlands or wherever else, or whether the expenses are such that we have to look at some kind of fee or an increase in taxes. It's a TBD.
So do we have our MS4 permit yet?
Yeah, we've had that for 2
Yeah,
years.
for a couple of years.
Okay.
Any other questions on ARP? I think this will be the final slide, I think.
Yes. So this slide just lists out what our capital equipment purchases have been over the last few years along the top, and then what our major capital purchases are for 2022. And we've already discussed these. I just wanted to include them, as they stand in the current budget. So.
Are there any questions on this from the board or the public? We've talked about this with at least 2, if not 3 meetings.
The parks item, that's being paid for out of the restricted park?
Yes.
Fund?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
I asked a meeting or 2 ago if professional fees were paid out of the capital reserve fund, and I was told absolutely not. But in the budget, professionals, let's see, engineer, no, that's not it. Just when I saw the professional or other expenditures.
No problem.
There is a line item there, but it's zero budget. It's an account that we had used previously. We don't budget anything.
Oh,
Yeah.
I know where it was. It was at the beginning of the budget where you were hitting on the narratives for each budget, and I think it said something about, anyway, don't move on. Sorry about that. I'll find it, but.
So that's the end of the presentation for the budget. I mean, I just want to go back to that conversation, what's still outstanding. It sounds to me like everything's in good shape except for 3 issues. One is the volunteer fire company contributions.
Yeah.
One was we will owe you in early December a decision from the board around the compensation for the township manager and the police chief. And there was one other one. What was it? Oh, the post-retirement benefit. We've asked Casey to get a view from the actuary around the assumptions that are currently in there to allow the board to make a decision on how much, if anything, to include in the budget.
Yep.
So it sounds to me like all those 3 won't get resolved until early December.
Yeah, the only change that I have now are the things we listed in sewer fund. So they're the
those
only
2
things.
changes. So I'd like to ask the board for a motion to approve the preliminary budget that has been posted to the website and presented here tonight for advertisement.
So moved.
Any board questions or comments on that? Any public questions or comments? Yes, Martin?
So I see here, 2022 capital expenses, natural lands consulting fees are listed as
That's a
coming out.
carryover, I believe, from this year, unless we've budgeted some additional
And
money.
it's in park improvements, and that has to do with the new Woodlands Park that we're going to be getting and trying to determine how we're going to, I guess, utilize that land, so.
So your question there, Mike, is that considered a professional service, or is it?
Well, yeah, it's showing a professional service, a consulting fee coming out of the capital reserve account. And
Okay, so the question, I don't know, I mean, is
Yeah.
that?
I mean, we've had that in the past, and it's really no different, in my opinion, than when we pay for engineering
Engineers,
fees
yeah.
on projects and
Project,
things
yeah.
like that. It's not, budgeted under professional services because it's
I look at it as it's to do with a specific capital asset, it's not to do with a
Right.
general service like legal services for this board.
Right.
Okay. We got a motion and a second, any other public comments, Doug?
I just have a comment about the sewer increase. On the one hand, do what you need to do for next year, but please possibly think about borrowing some money in such that doing the small borrowing and a standalone rate increase that would possibly result in a lower overall rate increase by still allowing you to do the projects that you need to do. It just might be a strategy to raise the funds with a lower increase and not upsetting the bond rating of the township too much.
Yeah,
That's all.
thank you.
I have a couple more comments.
Is the question on,
Cool.
about the motion or?
Yeah, about the motion.
Okay.
I would like to see and request that you actually make the changes between now and the workshop meeting, and then,
Well, we can't do that because we have to discuss it in a public meeting.
So,
Change,
for 20 days.
I'm sorry?
changes, we talked the three changes that are still to come, you mean, or?
Yeah, because if you change a certain line item any more than 10%, you have to re-advertise.
No, that is not correct. That's not correct. The board can change the budget right up until the 21st of December. You can't increase or decrease the budget by 10% once it's adopted into 22. That's the law.
Okay, I think you're mistaken, but, so I just want to talk about the past 10 years. I mean, I captured Ashley's concern last week, or 2 weeks ago, and I was really happy to hear the concern about the way the budget stands. I think we're over $700,000 deficit. And I think if there were a few adjustments made to the revenues that were advertising a balanced budget, which by law we're required to pass a balanced budget every year.
That's probably not a true statement. I'm not a lawyer, but we have to pass a budget that is funded. We have a funding mechanism to pay for what we have. We have funds on hand. That's balanced in that sense.
Point out, 2021, we're finishing general fund 3.7 million more than we expected to have this year. Last year, we finished at over 2 million. The year before that, 615. The year before that, 1.8, 2.39. So over the last 5 years, we have our $10 million that we say we might need for stormwater.
Well, it's not in the fund now, is it, though? Because although we had a higher revenues, we also had higher expenses. We have a balance of $12 million at the end of this year in the general fund. And then we have to look at what the costs are of our stormwater infrastructure to fix it. And it could be 10, it could be 15, it could be $18 million of projects over a certain period of time. And we can decide to ignore it and hope it doesn't break and fix a bit at a time. Or we can decide to borrow some money. We can't deplete the general fund by $12 million and have nothing left to pay the bill every month.
Our policy, our township policy that's stated,
Is not to have less than 25%.
and right now we're at 75%.
Yeah, that's not a big number, is it? It's $8 million maybe.
But we're not a for-profit business. I
If
feel
it's
like
been
we're
stable
being,
for years,
I feel like we're
and we've
being
got a nice
overtaxed.
rainy day fund, it isn't going to be big enough to fix the problems we have. So I'm just pointing it out. I understand we're not trying to raise taxes or anything else until we have to. I'm just saying we have a balance that is not going up anymore, it's going down in general. So, okay. Any more questions from the public? Okay, so ready to take a vote. Those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion carries 4-0. Thank you, Christine. Appreciate your efforts on pulling this together.
Yeah, very nice.
Walking us through it, providing information. Good job.
Excellent job. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine.
All right, we're going to see where we are. So we're up to agenda item number 4, discussion of draft Shade 3 ordinance. Who's the lead on this one?
So I think I suggested that we sort of just look at this tonight. Susan, I know that you're here, and if you wanted to address the ordinance and talk about raising it, this is adopted from, I think, London Grove, right? Has the board had a chance to look over the ordinance? Okay. I know that there were a couple of issues that were raised by Chris and Casey and Kristen about the responsibilities of the township somehow being altered by this ordinance, or things that we might think about including in the ordinance. Can you just touch on that briefly?
I made a list of my concerns, and it was based on after having conversations with staff. So the definition of street trees is very, very broad. So it includes shrubs and woody vegetation adjacent to, along, or within the public right-of-way. So adjacent to, I mean, to me, that's on private property. Along, like, I just think that would have to be narrowed down and make sure we absolutely know what the definition is and isn't. To me, if it's within the right-of-way, then that's fair game. If it's outside of the right-of-way, it's not a street tree. The definition of township trees is also very broad. The question I would raise there is, does it include land owned by the municipal authority? Since the township technically has a property interest in municipal authority property as the operator of the sewer system. So that's just something to think about. I'm just going to go through all my comments. Section 102 gives the SAC the authority to engage expert professionals and specialists as they deem appropriate. I think that's something that the board, the supervisors, and the power of the purse, and you would have to ultimately authorize and approve any expenditures.
So we can add that clause in.
Yeah, and these are just comments. I'm not, 201. I think that there's 3 different. This chooses, or this suggests that you have a list that identifies appropriate trees that we've planted as street trees or township trees, which is fine. There's references to the saldo and the zoning. So the zoning right now really deals with landscaping in perimeter buffers and in with parking, and it has an attachment as an exhibit that has a list of species. Those types of trees may be different trees that you want to see within parking lots and perimeters than you want to see as street trees. So there may be a different reason to have different trees on different lists. The saldo doesn't have a reference to any sort of an adopted list. So again, that's an arborist question, and the SAC is probably much more equipped to deal with that. But there may be different reasons for different lists based on what section of the code that list is appended to. So I think that's something to think through. The saldo, it's correctly pointed out, does not, and I think I took this from some of the emails from Susan, so that the saldo doesn't today have much really, as far as where street trees should be placed, what the distance between them should be, all that kind of thing. That to me is more appropriate to be placed within your saldo. If you're talking about a new development coming in or redevelopment of an existing property where trees are needed, that can be dealt with as part of your saldo. 206B, I mean, I'm not sure you need that. It says the township has the right to plant, prune, maintain, and remove all township trees as may be necessary. Well, you own the land, of course you do. So I'm not sure you need that section. 208, I just have, this came from comments from staff, does the township have appropriate staffing to handle additional permits being issued to arborists? 209, places exclusive custody and control of street trees in the name of the township. So right now, if a tree is within the right of way and is dangerous, another section of code, this is based on the second class township code, says that the township can notify the property owner, say you have to remove the dangerous tree. I just think we need to be clear. Do you want the township to take over responsibility? Because saying exclusive custody and control to me means that becomes a township issue. 209A, it's not clear that this only applies to street trees or township trees. So that deals with, so 209 says, again, township has exclusive custody and control of street trees and township trees and is authorized to plant, remove, and protect such trees. And it goes into, except in cases of emergency work, it shall be a violation of this chapter for any person too. But this stuff right here doesn't say, I mean, I read this to say that my private property, if I'm in West Goshen, I can't do those things. I think what that's intended to mean is applying to street trees and township trees, not, that's more challenging there. 302, I don't know why the fire marshal would be involved in the enforcement of this ordinance. So that would be something I just question why that's in there. Those are my comments.
Kristen, can I go back to the first street tree definition? So if it's just in a public right, what about a tree that is right on the edge of the public, right on the right of way, but kind of has a big canopy over the actual right of way? So the trunk itself sits on private property, but 30%, 50% of the trees hanging over the covered right of way. How does that situation get defined one way or another?
I mean, I think that I don't know what your policy decisions are. I don't know what are you trying. I think the biggest question I have for you is what does the board want to achieve? What are you intending to do here? I don't know that, so it's hard for me to evaluate. I'm not saying you can't do it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying what is it that you're really trying to achieve here?
Okay.
So one of the reasons that I just wanted to have this discussion and review your comments is to bring it back to the SAC for their upcoming meeting so that we can have that discussion and kind of figure out the answer to that question.
Okay. Yeah, and what I can do is send this to you. I sort of wanted to understand what the board's goal was and then tailor my comments based, are you achieving that goal or are you not, or some suggestions for how we can appropriately achieve that goal.
Susan, do you want to make a comment?
Sure.
Is that okay, Sean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead.
So this draft ordinance was based mainly on the Londonboro Township ordinance, but took a couple sections from some other ordinances, including that large portion from East Goshen. So there may be some inconsistencies within those sections. The first comment about the definition of street trees, so I, of course, defer to solicitor in terms of wording of the ordinance, but I would read it as, in fact, street trees are defined as located adjacent to, along, or upon the side of any street and within the public right of way. So the intention is that these are trees within the public right of way. That, again, so the drafting may be, you may prefer to revise it, but the intent was not to pull in trees that are just along the road. And I think section 81-3 is referred to in the section, is referred to below in, but that basically defines trees within the public right of way, so that should be consistent, I think. We're only talking about those, so those are what we call street trees. And that's the intent. So there may be some drafting that, tweaking that will just fix that problem.
Kristen, you're the solicitor for East Goshen, right? So they have a tree ordinance?
Not street tree ordinance, something where.
So what did you pull from East Goshen, Susan?
The section,
I mean, the only shade tree, I know Chris raised it for Mountain, the borough of Westchester struggled with this. And they had they were doing a pretty broad, taking on more authority over trees. And when it got to the public hearing, there was a lot of pushback. And they ended up they backed it back a lot. So I'm happy to share with you that. They're a little bit different than you though. I mean, they had a lot of established roads with street trees that were causing a lot of problems for a lot of people, both property owners and borough. So it was an issue that needed to be addressed. Again, if somebody can articulate it, maybe I should go to the SAC just to understand, what are you trying to accomplish?
I want to revisit that standard, that requirement from tree sitting and kind of look at what's suggested there. When I was asked, when you came to me and said, was it the intent to have the township now take on a bunch of this extra? I didn't think it was. I didn't think that we were going down that difficult of a road to then.
And that's exactly what.
Yeah, because that's 200 lane miles of trees and bushes that you're going to ask us to maintain.
No, that wasn't the intent. That's not.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so was that section 209? Was that?
Yeah, that's the one that was
What's
the only one.
I think 209, the intent. So tree city standard requires that somebody be legally responsible for trees.
For the township trees that this township has.
Township property. We are.
And we're trying to define it effectively in this ordinance so that we're doing the right thing with respect to those trees. That's the goal, I think. So we have a plan for replacement or whatever else, maintenance and the proper care and attention.
So I think that we should take these comments back to the SAC meeting, and then hopefully in the December workshop, I don't know, we'll talk about, we can put it on that agenda. We can.
Sounds good.
Have it?
Yeah.
Can we get some other ordinances to compare? I mean, you mentioned Westchester Borough has an ordinance.
Well, but I think before we do that, to understand what the goal is. I mean, I can bring you ordinances that are extremely restrictive and ordinances that are fluffy, but I need to understand what the goal is.
And I think just in looking at the township versus a borough like Westchester or Malvern, it's sort of it's a different landscape since they're more laid out like a grid system. As Kristen said, they have established street trees. Like in Malvern, we defined the whole protection zone, which ran along the right-of-way plus additional feet. That may not be conducive to West Goshen.
Right.
I'm sure there are other townships like West Goshen as well with this.
Yeah, and you brought out the sample municipal tree ordinance, tree advisory ordinances from Tree City USA.
Yep.
This is pretty straightforward and simple.
Okay.
Maybe the SEC looks at this
Exactly.
and says, does this accomplish it? And then we tweak that and use that as a model.
I'd like to thank everyone for their efforts in trying to move this forward. Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Kristen, for weighing in and challenges as what are we trying to get out of it. It's a good idea. Are we good to move on? Boys? Yeah. So item number 5 is discussion of possible approval of natural de-icing liquid bid opened on November the 9th, 2021.
Yeah, so we received one bid from Waverly Industries, 4 bids that were opened earlier this month. Their bid was $3.49 per gallon. I also included in the memo the past several years. 2020 was $3.20 from
So
Waverly.
2020 was the 21's
Correct.
season.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So in 2020 for 21, it was $3.20 from, again, Waverly Industries. 2019 for 2022 was $3.19 from CPI Road Solutions. And then 2018 through 2016 was a company called GVM Incorporated. For 2018, it was $2.37, $2.05 in 2017, and $1.91 in 2016. So we've seen a significant rise in prices, but again, it's because there's more demand for it.
There's more demand, and this year is basically trucking.
Yes, exactly. There's a huge cost for trucking us from from Indiana, liquid over on a truck. So it's just very expensive to sell.
Dave, have we been doing the beet juice since 16 or it was 16?
No, we've been doing the beet juice for about 11, 12 years.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so all these prices, they reflect the same.
Yeah, and actually the last two, Waverly Industries is actually Road Solutions. They've been bought out or changed names or something. They're actually the company we started with back in the original.
Yeah. Okay. And did we budget, so we just went through at 349?
Yeah, we budgeted, yeah.
You got a
Budgeted at 349 or a bit more or a bit less?
We didn't, yeah, we kind of, we figure on 1 to 2 loads, 3 at the worst. We don't like the big winners when we have to get 3 loads.
Yeah.
But, you know, usually 2 loads will do us.
Okay.
How many gallons is that approximately?
4,500 on a delivery.
Any other questions from the board on the bid?
No, just, we had a chance, Sean and I had a chance to look at your operation over there at the facility building from the beat up. It's pretty impressive, so it's all done in-house. Let me ask you a question. What effect is this beet juice on the environment? Is it toxic in any way? Does it cause any problems
No, it's
to wildlife? Any problems with the MS4 permit that we have?
No, it's a natural product. It actually reduces the amount of salt that we use. It eliminates the bounce and scatter. If we use regular plain salt, we'll lose 30% in everybody's front lawns. With the beet juice, it stays on the earth.
So by using the beet juice, it's more effective than using salt.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. Definitely.
And it also reduces the temperature at which ice melts, so it has an more effective ice and snow melting capability than just salt as well.
Yeah, as the temperature goes down, you have to use more and more salt. Yeah. When we use beet salt, we don't run into that. We can keep our rates the same.
Exactly.
And they say it actually helps with corrosion on our trucks and you know, other people's vehicles. It helps a little bit, but as John's been underneath our trucks, he's seen what they look like underneath. We still get a lot of corrosion.
You have made a motion to accept the bid from Waverly Industries for $3.49 per gallon. To a second.
Second.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Any other final board comments or questions? Any public comments, Doug?
Okay, so the brine you put down the road, that's the beet juice, right?
No, we like to put beet in, but our brine maker has not, it doesn't like it. So we can't put it in our actual brine. We actually pre-treat all our salt. If you look at our salt's actually brown. That's treated with the beet juice.
So when you brine the streets first,
that's just salt, 23% salt solution.
It's a BoS sauce, okay. And then the beet juice goes down.
The beet juice goes on the salt, which then goes down.
Okay. Any other public questions or comments? Okay, ready to take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against say nay. Motion approved 4-0. Next on the agenda is item number 6, discussion and possible approval of the 2021 Senior Citizen Trash and Sewer Rebate Program. Casey?
Yeah, our annual 80% reimbursement program for our senior citizens who qualify is, again, before the board. A list has been slightly reducing over the years, but we still have a good number of residents who qualify for the program. Again, this year, I think for the second or third year, it includes the sewer as well. So they receive an 80% rebate on their trash and also their annual expenses for sewer treatment as well.
How many years has the program been in place?
Oh gosh, 25, it's been a long time.
And what determines the percent rebate and what was the rationale for bringing the sewer in?
Certainly. The overall program is based on the Pennsylvania, the residents have to apply for a property tax rebate with the state. They have to go through that whole approval process. Then they give us their approval form. We check to make sure that they've actually paid their bill. And then the board approves it. So that list that you receive, everybody's been vetted by the state and us. So they qualify under all the requirements. And the sewer rate rebate, let me see, what was that, maybe 4 years ago, I believe?
This is the board decision.
Just a board, it's all policy decision. Yeah, yeah, it's completely discretionary decision by the board.
State has determined this.
Yeah.
So it's everybody below that income level.
Just include the sewer report. That would be introduced in the rate increase.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. Any other board questions?
Well, just update the litter, that's all.
It's already done. That was our clerk downstairs, she forgot to update, so I'll take care.
He was made a motion to approve the list of services and rebate program for 2021 for the second.
I'll second. Yep.
Thank you, President. Any final board comments or questions? Any public comments or questions? Margie? It's like the bid, that little finger one there. It's like, are you bidding or?
I just, no. I would really like to see this program expanded, just not to senior citizens, but anyone who's in the lower threshold. Maybe reduce the percentage instead of 80%, maybe make it 50%, and then open it up to anyone that's below the poverty line. I do want to note in the budget as well, Casey said the number of people applying for it has been reduced. However, in 2022 budget, it goes from, it's budgeted at $50,000, where the actual in 2020 was $29,000. So
We are taking a couple of increases next year.
Yeah, we have sewer and trash increases.
I don't know if that explains the whole difference. Maybe the budget's a little high, I don't know. You don't know until everybody applies,
No,
right?
exactly. And then number fluctuates each year, so we don't know.
Senior section,
They're on private for trash, but they,
public sewer,
and those homes are $850. So I don't think they're going to be applying for a property tax rebate. No, I would hope not.
Like in the asset rich and income poor, you know.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Thank you for your comment, Margie. If the board was interested in that, how is there publicly available information to calculate what that would be?
I don't even know how we would have to get tax return information. I'm not even sure how we would.
Would the state know if people had applied for a property tax rebate weren't over 65, or is that information public knowledge?
I don't know.
I'm not sure you can do it on property tax. You like.
Well, that's what we're doing now. We're basing it on.
I know, it's based on a state statute, so I'd like to look at the state statute. Your ability to give these rebates is based on the state statute giving you authority.
And it's only if they're over 65 right now.
Yeah, I don't know it off the top of my head,
You
but
can let the
I'll
board
provide
know,
it to you,
sure.
yeah, because I don't know that. Something about it, taxes have to be uniform, so there has to be authorization to allow you to vary that. And this authorization has specific parameters. I can't speak off the top of my head, but I'll find that and send it to you.
Just one last comment on that. I'm just curious, those that are continually delinquent in their sewer fees, I see our sewer fine for being late is like $50,000 a year. Is there any way to track or offer a reduced or a rebate for those people that might have an outstanding balance at the end of the year?
They do not get a rebate from us if they haven't paid their bill. They have to pay their bill in order to get the money back.
Well, I understand that, but those that
You're talking about other people
are
in the
delinquent,
program.
those that are delinquent, maybe they don't have the funds to actually pay.
Well, it comes back to Krista's point that
Right.
we're not authorized to treat,
right.
Everybody has to be treated the same kind of thing. It's authorized by state statute.
Right.
We can't say, well, sorry, you're having issues, we'll go with you. Okay, any other questions or comments? Get ready to take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say nay. Thank you, Good. Thank you, Casey. Okay, we're up to agenda item number 7, report for the month of October. Police report presented by Chief Carroll. Thank you.
For the month of October 2021, the police department responded to 2,114 calls for service. Of those, 56 were alarm calls and 7 of the alarms were valid. We responded to 82 accidents, with 26 of those accidents being reportable, and we drove a total of 16,513 miles. We performed extra traffic enforcement duties on West Warren Road, Taylor's Mill Road, Ellis Lane, East Gay Street, Paley Pike, and Spruce Avenue, South Five Points Road, South New Street, and Kirkland Avenue. And among our training this month was our normal monthly Lexipol and 3 VTM training, which is the Act 180. Our ERT team did its normal training this month. Officer Kennedy McGee attended CIT training, which is the Crisis Intervention Training. A portion of the department finished their fall range training, and a portion finished their every 3-year EVOP, Emergency Vehicle Operation courses. We also had officers Manko and McGee certified as defensive tactic instructors with the new law in Pennsylvania that we have to supply that training for next year. Sergeant Chrysler continued his commander leadership training, and Detective Edwards and Virgilio went to ICAT training, which is Integrated Communications Assessment and Tactics. It's something that PERF has put out, which is a national agency police executive research forum for the use of de-escalation and different tactics to try and keep the police out. So that's the report for the police department for the month. I'll certainly accept any questions.
Any questions for the chief? I just have two for you. The valid alarms, are there businesses or properties that are targeted more in West Goshen over the years that you're aware of, or that you would,
a large portion of the valid alarms aren't necessarily burglaries. They're caused by weather events. So we don't charge people if a thunderstorm causes their alarm to go off. We consider that valid.
I guess it's a more general question. It's just that the valid alarms make me think of it, which is other business locations that are kind of known target areas, whether it's pharmacies on busy intersections or...
Not over a long period of time. We did have a stint last summer with the new homes up in Draken, where they were going in and taking appliances. That seems to have stopped. So over a long haul now, no specific businesses.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions from the public for the chief?
Do you get on private residence alarms?
We do.
Like mistakes?
Yes, most of them. So of the 56 alarms, majority of them would be residents.
Tina, the board instituted a fee for that.
I know, I paid it. More than once.
Sorry.
I would like to say thank you very much for the presentation of the awards and doing that in public meeting. That really exemplifies how good our PD is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was great stuff for me.
Can I add to that? I thought that was very nice too, and I really enjoyed that. And going forward, I would love when you hire new officers for them to be sworn in at a public meeting.
So we do like to do that. COVID hit us last year when we swore in a bunch of officers, so we had special meetings for that reason, but moving forward, that would be our intent.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Margie.
A quick question. On the ambulance calls, you can speak on the ambulance calls, right?
Sure.
22 Turner, there seems to be the problem chart here, look, 30 calls to
Yes.
22 Turner in the past month. Is there any...
It's a group homes, remember we had that?
Yeah, I know. Is there any resolution in sight for that
We
situation?
have spoken to the owner of that property. They are working on a resolution, but it's not something that's happening quickly.
Okay. All right, very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item number 8, Board of Supervisors announcements. On my right, John.
Okay, an announcement that I had. We had the opportunity to get together with folks from Natural Lands earlier this month, this year, on November the 8th, on Monday, November the 8th, myself and Sean and Robin and Rick Craig and a couple of Ken Lear and Tom Seams met with a couple of folks from Natural Lands to look at their Chesterland Reserve out there in Chester County to see what they did with the serpentine barrens and how they were able to recover it, maintain it, and how they have that part of their reserve available for studies being done by colleges in the area. It's quite an interesting tour of that reserve. So they are working with us to on the Greystone Park, and I think they're going to be a great help in making the Serpentine Barrens an important part of that park once we take full dedication over it. So that's my announcement.
Thanks, John. Ashley?
I don't think I have any announcements.
Well, I was also able to attend the meeting with John at the National Lands. That is a great organization. They really run fantastic parks. I have to say, I was actually not quite sure what I was looking at the Serpentine Barrens. I was expecting something a little bit more identifiable, and it was just like a little bit of rock.
It's just some land.
So that's just me. I've obviously got a lot to learn. The other announcement I have is the board met in an executive session on Wednesday, October the 27th to discuss personnel matters. You?
Yes. First of all, my tenure is coming to a close, and I don't know whether in the next couple of meetings I'll have the opportunity, so I'm going to take it now. I have enjoyed being of service to the township. Tried my darndest to do a good job and keep the township on an even keel. The one thing that I'm disappointed about is the stalling or the non-passing of a historical preservation ordinance for buildings and areas. I think we have a really great historical heritage here, and it should be preserved as much as possible without really becoming a burden either on the owner of the property or on the township. So whatever we can do to preserve some of our really nice properties, I appreciate it. I look forward to hoping that would happen in the future. Thank you.
Well, we're going to give you a proper send-off, so don't worry. We've got 2 more meetings that we have to live with you for, so we're going to make sure we make you as comfortable as possible. We'll have an appropriate celebration of your contributions to the township. And you know what? We have a lot of volunteer committees, one of which is our historical committee or got a pension committee, if you want to, weigh in on that.
The pension committee.
So you don't have to disappear on this.
Yeah, that's near and dear to my heart, so I'll continue to do that if you want me to.
Oh, well, we're always looking for people to volunteer and help. Maybe we'll get you on the SAC and we can get you to buy some plastic bags for us. How about that?
No comment.
No comment. We'll see you in a couple of more meetings. All right. Next on the agenda is number 9, Township Manager's announcements.
Yeah, I just have one general park and rec announcement. We do have some space still on our bus trips upcoming to New York and some other things going on. So please check our website for those registration forms. The response, obviously, people are still a little worried and skittish with COVID, and New York is very strict with you got to show your vaccination card and mask everywhere. But we are getting people to come out and take the trips with us. So just please check our website if any interest for that. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Next is Township Engineer, stormwater announcements, and any woodlands update.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Pine Valley Community Stormwater Project has started, but it's in the mobilization phase right now. So actual construction is not expected to occur until after Thanksgiving, but it should occur the week after Thanksgiving, weather permitting. The Sunset Hollow Stormwater Project is delayed due to the inability to get the head walls and end walls until at least the middle of December. So that project's delayed a little bit due to no fault of the contractor or the township. With regard to Greystone, construction is continuing as has been in the past, and starting tomorrow, Dave and I will be starting to inspect Aaron Avenue for dedication of that roadway. That's all I have.
So Rick, what's the timeline, you think, for completing the inspection on Aaron Avenue? When
probably going to take us about 3 weeks to complete.
So in December sometime.
Right.
And Sunset Hollow, if the work starts in mid-December, how much construction time is it? Is it a 4-week project? Is it a...
That's, at this point, totally impossible to predict. It's completely weather dependent.
So maybe stop-start through...
Well, yeah, probably. I mean, it depends. If we have a warm winter, it could go very quickly. If we have a cold winter, it's going to go very slowly. Just to give you an idea, PennDOT allocates working days during different months due to weather, which is a total guess. But for December, January, and February, they generally allocate 2 to 3 working days a month. So it's going to be completely dependent on the weather. You know, the contractor will work when he can, but it's up to the weather.
Is there much interruption to traffic during that construction period?
It's closed.
The road's going to be closed.
The road will be closed.
So it could be closed for 3 months.
Well, it'll be closed for the crossing.
Right. Crossing.
So hopefully,
The crossing's right there before Grubbs Mill though, right?
about halfway between Grubbs Mill and
New Street. Okay, and how, the crossing work will take how long, do you think?
Well, again, like Rick said, it's weather dependent. I mean, good weather, you could get in there 2 weeks and at least have it temporary paved.
Are we going to do some notification about
Oh, yeah.
it? How much in advance? A week notice? Or?
The signage, I think, has to go up 2 weeks ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me ask a question. Where are we at as far as the agreement with the developer for Greystone for Aaron Avenue dedication? I mean, do we have that in place yet?
I sent the revised draft to the staff today, I got comments back. You're not going to act on it until the punch list items are completed. So there's some time before it'll come to you.
And just to give you an idea, we're looking at 3 weeks to do the inspection. That does not mean it's going to be ready for dedication. There is already a significant list of stuff that has to be completed prior to dedication. And some of that is significant, like the drainage issues at the first roundabout on the east. So this is not going to happen quickly.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you're inspecting it. Make sure you go with tooth comb.
We will definitely do that.
Good. Any other questions for Rick? Any questions from the public for Rick? Doug?
Rick, as far as what happened to part of the wooded buffer on Woodview Lane, I know you're working on that, but does that constitute a violation of the conditional use, and what recourse does the township really have to get that buffer restored?
Okay, you're right, we are working on that. The developer just recently restaked the property line. I went out and looked at it today. Chris and I are going to go out and look at it tomorrow. It is not a conditional use issue, it's a land development plan approval issue. That buffer was to be retained according to the approved and recorded land development plans. And Kristen can speak better than I, but I believe we have the right to require that to be maintained.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's enforcement remedies under the Saldo provisions. I mean, typically, as with any violation of land development plans, code section, anything, that staff typically tries to work with the violator and try to get compliance. It sounds like that's what they're doing. If we get, if the developer indicates that no, they're not going to do it, then we'll cite them under the Saldo. And there's $500, so the fines can run to be $500 per day violation. So there is a remedy if they fail to adhere to the land development plan.
So are the homeowners, would the homeowners be responsible?
No, the developer.
Well,
if the developer, well, I don't know the facts of it, but whoever took the buffering down.
Well, this is going to be the sticky wicket, because I spoke to one of the property owners this afternoon. He came out and wanted to know what I was doing in his backyard. And I told him. And he said, well, the developer removed part of this, and I removed part of this. So basically said he removed part of it. And it's basically all been removed for 4 lots. So something's going to have to be done to reestablish it. We're going to have to work with the developer and possibly the individual property owners, because apparently they worked together to get that done. But we need to get it restored. And, we're gonna have to come to some reasonable resolution of how to restore it, because we obviously can't put back exactly what was there. But the intent of the vegetated buffer was to provide a buffer between the Woodview properties and the new properties, not screening, but a buffer.
Yeah, just to retain what was there in the 20 feet.
Right.
And Rick, that's clearly noted on the plans, and there's notes to enforce that? Yeah. Well then, I'll take back what I said. I mean, I didn't realize the property owners themselves had removed it. They're bound by the terms. When you buy a lot based on an approved subdivision plan, you as the owner of that lot are bound to comply with what restrictions go against that particular lot. So if that buffer is a requirement that rate maintained, and a property owner removed it, then they can be cited for that removal. Again, you try to take appropriate measures and have communication to let them know what the law requires, what the plan requires, give them a certain time to come into compliance, and when they don't, then we can, you have the ability to cite them and use enforcement if you have to.
Right, and we're very hopeful that once the property owners become aware of that, because this property owner had no idea what was on the plan, doesn't have the plan, doesn't look at the plan, because nobody ever does, which is unfortunate. But, you know, we're going to try to come to an amicable resolution where the developer and or the property owners restore vegetation to that area to approximate, you know, what was there before. Quite honestly, if we're successful in getting that done, it'll probably look a lot nicer than what was there before in the first place.
But a lot of these mature trees were removed.
I can't argue with that, and you know, we have records of what was there and what's there now, and we can't replace big trees that were removed, but we can put other trees there in their place, and we will do our best to get that done. And again, that's not going to happen overnight either, because we're out of growing season. So. But it gives us the winter to get some resolution, and when the spring comes, hopefully we can get it implemented.
And thank you for being aware of it and working on it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Rick?
Actually, for Rick and John, back to John's comment, would you just clarify for me the natural lands contract, or what's being discussed, is that just for the 24 or 32 acres now?
It's for the entire 162.
Okay, so that's changed, because originally and during the planning process, you had always talked about either going to Westchester University or...
Oh, no. That goes back to 2007. There was never any plans to use Westchester University. That was discussed maybe, but it was always the board's intent to use natural lands or another.
For the entire park?
Correct. We do not have the staff, the expertise, or the know-how to take care of 162 acres of wooded open space like that.
Okay. But that's what I thought I understood when Natural Lands Trust was here, but I thought all the way through the planning process it was just for the portion that contained the serpentine barrels.
Yeah, it was for the entire site.
I mean, we still haven't nailed down exactly
there's
what that management plan,
exactly.
the site is going to look like. So there's a little bit of, we're working with them, but we're kind of waiting to see what the final proposal is. So we're hoping it's not sticker shock.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because I mean, I
So we
see
haven't
that.
approved anything other than keep them working with them at this point. So
What's that?
we haven't approved anything other than
Yeah. Have we talked to East Bradford Township? I mean, they do such a remarkable job on the Brandywine Trail.
Is that a serpentine barren?
No, but part of the sale of getting the land development approved was this was a passive park, and this was going to be such a great thing for the township. We're going to get the 168 acres, and it's going to be very little added work for our staff. And it just was a shock to me a couple weeks ago when they were here. That had never been part of the discussions as far as I can remember.
I don't think it was ever determined that it was going to be little work for our staff.
No.
Passive Park is
We've
a
been
lot of
discussing that for...
And in fact, we've even talked about during the planning process, which we're not doing at this point, but we even talked about putting a building there for public works mobilization because of the extra work that it would be. So I don't think anybody ever thought this was going to be little work. It's going to be a lot of work to maintain it. But it's a different type of park than what we have elsewhere. Quite frankly, I think it's, maybe Dave correct me, but I think it's easier to deal with something like community park where, you know, you mow the lawn and you do the maintenance. compared to a passive park, which requires a lot more know-how of how to maintain the trails, how to maintain the flora, how to maintain the infrastructure without damaging the park.
The trail maintenance, the tree maintenance, that's going to be an ongoing project up there.
Yeah, I mean, John, you can weigh in on this too. I mean, we talked with the park manager up there at Chestnut. That's a big park, 1,200 acres, whatever it is. I mean, there's a combination of, yeah, they do work on the barns, but, you know, they don't have big equipment. They do it kind of now and then. It's some kind of multi-year kind of project. It's not like they're out there with scissors every day trimming fauna and flora. And, you know, the rest of it, they manage with, hey, we need to take these trees out to allow the barns here, or we need to do, but they'll leave dead trees and other stuff because of the whole management plan that they have. So they have the expertise to manage that kind of a property, but I don't think it's like intensive out there with chainsaws trimming this and doing that every day of the week. It's not like that.
Well, what they're doing now for us, working with the developer, the recovery part of the project is what is very intensive. They have to move a lot of dirt, and sometimes they have to move as much as 6 to 8 inches of dirt to expose the serpentine rock layer. And they're working with the developer now while they have the equipment on site to be able to do that. And that's what's really key, to take advantage of their expertise at this juncture. But after that's done, then it's going to be a matter of, like Sean was saying, just basically maintaining and opening up the park to research studies and things of that nature. So it's going to be quite an addition to the township.
Just want to briefly say thank you so much. Serpentine is a globally rare ecosystem.
That's correct.
Yeah, and we in our township to commit to taking care of it in this way is really remarkable. And I just want to thank the board for supporting that effort and engaging natural lands. Couldn't do better than that.
There were people coming from all over research, different universities, just to study the specific kinds of plants that could grow in that kind of a environment. And apparently it's very restricted, like you said, it's very rare. So it's going to put West Goshen on the map for a lot of people, just maintaining this and having this available to them.
Okay, thanks. Do you want to make a point? Or?
I do. First of all, they didn't know that there were serpentine barrens there, and I pointed that out in the negotiation with the Rebate group. The 30 extra acres that are on the corner of Phoenixville Pike and the bypass is primarily where the serpentine is located. Was scheduled to have a whole area developed on top of it. After I pointed that out, they added 30-some acres to the park restriction. In addition, I've negotiated with and finished a project in Honeybrook with National Lands Trust, in which 47 acres were acquired. We got partial funding for that from the open space fund, yes, from Chester County. Normally Natural Lands Trust requires a basic deposit or good faith payment of several thousands of dollars, which they use then to administer and maintain the property. In the case of the Honeybrook property, I'm still involved with it. This happened 25 years ago now. They come out and inspect it once a year. They make suggestions to us. We have an original elm growing on there, for example, that's survived the blight. That's become a research tree because it was resistant to the blight, that type of thing. So they're very good, but they don't come in, as was pointed out, they don't come in with a chainsaw or a rake or anything like that to maintain the property. They put it on, they put the basic open space money for the county. I'll be glad to help and offer my experience.
Sounds like you're on the Parks and Rec board too. And the committee gets involved with that, you can be helping out with certain people.
Sean, when I first ran for supervisor, I thought it would be maybe 8 or 10 hours a week. It ended up being 20.
We've all learned that lesson.
So, let's not suck me into too much. Anyhow, that's the story on Natural Lands Trust. They are a good group, an easy group to work with. My experience, nothing but fun.
Good, well, thank you for your comments, it's great. I think we're still with Rick, so thank you, Rick. Appreciate your updates. We're ready for zoning officer. Bill.
Yes, sir. So the zoning hearing board met last week with regards to 890 Justin Lane. And the zoning hearing board's going to render their decision on that matter on December 8th, which brings me to the next part of this evening's announcement, because I have two new applications that we need to determine whether we're going to take a position on. So this will be application 21 of 2021, and we broke the record. 22 of 2021. The first one, application 21, is for 211 Garfield Avenue. The applicant is A. Dewey Pyle. The property is zoned I-3. They are requesting to place, there's two businesses that are already occupying the property, one of which is a wood cutting business, tree service, and the other one is a wholesale mulch business. It does not allow any retail sales. Those two businesses, they have sheds on the property. Not allowed to have sheds on the property, so they're seeking relief just as Goshen Terrace and Goshen Manor did, because we do not allow sheds to be placed on non-residentially zoned properties. So they're seeking variance relief from section 84-39A. I would not recommend we take a position.
How big are the sheds?
One is 8 by 8 and 12 by 24. John Beswick has already had conversations with them to see if they would comply with the building code. He has no objection. So again, I would recommend no action from the board, but as you see.
Any questions for Bill on that particular application?
Okay. No action?
No action.
Perfect. Application 22 of 2021 is for 300 Snyder Avenue. This applicant is running concurrent. They have filed a land development for that property to build a self-storage facility. They need 3 variances. None are engineering related. They are requesting to be able to place 2 freestanding signs, one on the 202 side of the building and one on the Snyder Avenue side of the building. Zoning ordinance currently only allows you to have 1 freestanding sign. So they're requesting to have 2 freestanding signs. They are requesting to be able, a special exception, to be able to run their utilities across the floodplain, which is pretty common variance that we get for a property borders floodplain. And finally, they are requesting a variance. We need to look at the parking requirements for self-storage facilities because they're requesting a variance from 8455I2 because the zoning ordinance says that a self-storage facility may have no more than 5 parking spaces. So they're requesting to be able to have more than 5 parking spaces. I think I understand where the ordinance was going because under what was the traditional self-storage facility, was you drove up to the door, you lifted it up, you threw your stuff in, you drove away. these newer facilities they look like office buildings. This is gonna look like an office building. They're not gonna know it's a self-storage. So people physically have to park in a parking lot and take their stuff in through limited doors and whatnot. So they're requesting those 3 variances.
How many parking spots do they want?
I have to look at I'd have to look, I think it was like 15.
Okay.
It was like 15 and 20.
Are they gonna do this RV parking on this?
No outdoor parking, just all internal storage. Yeah.
Utilities on a floodplain, do we have special requirements for conduit engineering, or whatever, for permitting that?
No. There's a special exception requirement because normally no construction is allowed in floodplain. But there are a few exceptions, one of them being utilities. As long as they stay underground, there's no changes to the grade fundamentally, so there's no impact on the floodplain. So that's the requirement, that there be no impact on the floodplain.
And going back to the signage, why would we grant a relief on signage versus other people who comply, who have businesses that face 202?
They have 2 front yards.
Have 2 front yards?
Yeah, they have a front yard on Slender Avenue.
Okay.
And they have a front yard on 202.
Is there any other businesses that are in that situation that we claim they want to have?
Since I've been here, no one has come to us and asked. I mean, we have traditionally, we have never opposed sign variance since I've been here.
This property,
Yeah. I mean, my point there is just equity with someone who has complied in the past. I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying, someone's got the same situation, complied, and then they want a variance. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, since I've been here, no one has asked to have 2 freestanding signs outside of it, because they have 2 front yards.
It's like, I'm curious as to how many other properties could see this and then say, well, I want that too, and then you get, 4 requests for more signage.
The other issue this property has with signage is that it's a subdivision as well as a land development. So there's an existing residence which is going to be demolished on the property adjacent to Snyder Avenue. The self-storage property is a flag lot, so the building will not be visible from Snyder Avenue. So it's not an issue where you can put the sign on the building instead of having it freestanding because you can't see the building. So
what about from 202?
you'll be able to see the building from 202, but it's still a fairly significant distance from the building to 202. So I think they could probably make a case that it'll be difficult to see a building mounted sign versus a freestanding sign. I mean, I personally don't care one or the other. It's a different situation.
I also think a variance, I mean, that's their burden. They have to show that there are unique physical characteristics of their lot that make it such that they can't really comply, or that there's a hardship if they try to comply with the ordinance. So I hear what you're saying about precedent, but that's what's very important about these cases, is that you examine what their property configuration is, what the distance is from the various streets, that kind of thing. So
the HB decision, and just, you heard the conversation here between Rebate with the HB member.
I'd like to raise an issue, and this came before the planning commission last meeting, and it's just an initial submission, so Rick really hadn't had a chance to look at it. But they're asking for additional parking spaces. Is that one of the variances they're requesting?
Yeah.
Well, this is a heavily wooded lot as it is, and the reason why it hasn't been already built on is because it has a very steep grade to it. But the additional parking spaces is going to be even less pervious space or pervious ground for water absorption and less trees. So I don't know if this is something we want to buy into.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, if this was an office building, we would be asking them to put 3 spaces per 1,000 square feet.
Yeah.
This is our zoning ordinance is outdated and needs to be reviewed. We've had this conversation. Sean and I just had this conversation last week, talking about possible density, adding density bonuses and such. Because again, the zoning ordinance is a living, breathing document and should keep up with time. So I understand your point, but if this was an office building, which would be an allowable use, they would be a lot more parking. These folks are just, our ordinance, I've never seen an ordinance that says you can have, puts a maximum number. It's usually a minimum, not a max. I've never seen a zoning ordinance in like 21 years of doing this.
Well, times are changing, Bill.
Yeah.
We've built out, we've got less trees, we've got more impervious surface, and my God, there's water everywhere. So maybe we need to start thinking about how much we build now.
But that's true of impervious cover max for.
I know, but you know, we've got, they're just numbers to me at this point. What is the reality that people experience with impervious surface?
But if you're going to allow a use, and that use has changed significantly in the past couple of years, they're the people that operate those uses know what the true demand is for parking. They're not going to build parking if they don't think they need them. You know what I mean? So I think that you have to understand why they think 5 doesn't meet their business needs, because if it's a use that's going to be viable, and it's a use that you allow, you have to let them park it for what they believe people really need the spaces for. They're not going to pay them.
I'm really just reinforcing Bill's comment that we need to make our zoning ordinances more living documents than they have been in the last 20 years. They need to be more thoroughly scrutinized and brought up to what we expect in development of all kinds and all zones. And that we've no initiative to do that, we just live with what we have. So we come before the board with these questions, and you know, we're kind of stuck half the time.
Yeah, one of the things that I suggest is that you get the applications in your packet, and like tonight when I was at Goshen, one of the reasons why I stayed is the applicants have to actually come up to the board and explain to you in a little bit more detail and pitch it for you. Like, because you have the right to take a position and go and oppose those applications. Or in East Goshen, they actually supported the application tonight, but they had an attorney come and advocate for why that relief was needed. I mean, that's just an option. I'm not saying you have to do that. Maybe your meetings are long enough, but that's an option if you want applicants to do that.
Generally, I've been putting the applications
Yeah,
together for them. However, this application arrived today.
I know, but you don't have to, they don't have to go
I
there for 60 days.
I understand that, but there's some other things going on.
I know.
And the zoning hearing board would like to just close out the year.
I understand, I'm just saying, if the board wants to evaluate them with more.
Well, we typically do.
Yeah.
And we do. The bill normally includes them, and we get a look at them and ask them a few more questions.
I mean,
so it's not that many, I know. It's like the one exception tonight where it's like, well, what really does it look like? I can't visualize it.
Yeah, I mean, it is up to you guys whether you want to say.
So I'm going to go back to what I said. So you've heard comments from the planning commission, you've heard comments around, make the case and make the zoning hearing board say whether they feel it's justifiable, and I'm happy to let them take the decision. That's just my view right now. But the other bigger issue is going back to our ordinance.
I will go on the record with the board's concerns about impervious coverage and the amount of parking spaces on the case.
The other thing to keep in mind too is whatever impervious coverage they have to put on there, they have to do stormwater management for their code. The other thing, as John said, the planning commission had some significant heartburn for this project due to the amount of earthwork that's involved, because even though it appears, and again, I've not had an opportunity to do any review on this yet, but it appears that they're not developing on prohibited steep slopes, which they're not allowed to do. It appears that they are developing in precautionary steep slopes, which again, they're allowed to do under certain parameters. But there are members of the planning commission who are concerned that the earth moving involved is more intense than it should be for the site. Now the thing is, if it meets the code, I've got to recommend to you that we approve it. So this might be an area of the code that we might want to look at tweaking if it comes to the point that we've got it and it's too late for this project. But if it becomes a problem with the amount of earth that's got to be disturbed on relatively steep slopes, then maybe that's something that we have to tweak in the zoning ordinance again, because that's where the steep slopes requirements are.
I mean, this gets back to our conversation last week. I mean, the township is entering a new phase of its life cycle, and that is redevelopment. So you're going to have more projects that, you know, for instance, the one we're meeting about tomorrow. You know, when you put some green requirements in for and give density bonuses, maybe you can solve some of these things. But since they're not in place right now, we can't even ask them to do it.
The other thing is, yes, we are doing a lot of redevelopment, but what this site is this is a site that's been prohibitive to develop before because of the amount of earth moving that needs to be done. And now that there is no other sites available, people are willing to spend more money to develop it because there aren't so many alternatives. So we have to look at that aspect of it too. The more difficult sites are the ones that are coming before us for development now.
And this developer is spending some money because we've met with their team from Florida. They flew up here for a meeting with Chris, Rick, and myself. And we've met with them twice. I mean, they have a whole team come into the zoning hearing.
So where are we with the board here? Do we want to have any position on this? Do we want to just leave it as I just stated a minute ago for the zoning hearing board to understand some of the discussion we've had tonight? What's the board's position?
I think that that's the better decision for the zoning hearing board to hear about the comments that are made at the meeting.
That help me, how do we ask staff, maybe Chris or someone, Casey, to look at how we make a project out of looking at some of these zoning ordinances that are lacking behind where perhaps the board's mindset is relative to redevelopment. Like Rick gave an example, he wished he had more authority in some situation on this particular one. How do we manage that as a project?
I hate to say the worst thing is it's going to, you do it like you do your comprehensive plan.
Yeah, we applied for a vision partnership grant with the county. We hired a consultant. Kristen would be involved, the entire board would be involved, and we have a series of public meetings to discuss the zoning ordinance, and then it's completely redrafted. That can take upwards of 8 months to a year to get done, depending on the complexity.
So you would want the board, maybe the new board in January should decide whether to proceed with that.
Absolutely.
Way forward.
And I don't know the vision partnership schedule right now, but that will be the step. And they would pay for a portion of the overall project.
Vision partnership might be early in the year.
Yeah, it should be.
Like February.
Yeah.
I'm just going to make a comment. I just went through a 6-month-long campaign to get elected to this position here as the board supervisor, and I can tell you one of the big items on people's minds is that they want to see a retention of open space in our township. They're tired of seeing the overdevelopment, and like you said, it's a perfect example here. We don't have any space left, so what little is left that is undevelopable up to this point is now being attracting developers. But folks who live here don't want to see these places being built up.
You have to buy the land then.
They want to see a slowing down of the development.
You have to have an open space tax and buy the land. That's really what the answer is. You can't take away the right to
Unless they
develop.
own the property and then they don't want to change anything because they want the right to develop it.
So then does this affect the budget at all? We're talking about doing.
Well, so I think the request here is for you guys just to look at you understand what we're asking for, come back with this is how it would work, this is the timeline, this would have how involved it would be in terms of staff time, Kristen's time, this is kind of the ballpark of the cost.
Yeah,
we can talk about it in January.
Yeah, we could be spending upwards of $100,000 on it.
But short of that, the board could identify key goals, and we could take a look at
the key specific things,
Yeah.
so for example, is it looking at how apartments have to fit in a multi-purpose district zoning that is, redefine what that would look like. So are there some specific things that you could help the board understand? These are areas where we can see development and we need to, if you have an interest in making it greener, whatever you want to use, wood you want to use, how could the board effectively do that without doing a comprehensive relook at everything? Okay. Good discussion. Thank you, Bill. Hang on a minute. Bill, do you have anything else on those applications?
No, just those hearings are going to be on December 8th at 7 p.m.
Okay. Marcia?
The lights on the new apartment building to Lexor, have you seen that at night?
It's a beautiful purple.
Is that legal? I thought I was driving to a casino when I was going down to it.
Yeah, we don't have any laws about aesthetics.
Yeah, we can't regulate aesthetics, but they did meet the lighting. They met the lighting because that would have been. Yeah, because, John, as soon as they turn it
So you
on,
see it more now.
as soon as they turn it on, John Altshaw contacted us
Yep.
about it for Westtown.
It's a funky purple.
Yeah.
It's purple and pink now.
There's
Well,
also,
it's been sold, so maybe the colors will change.
is there anything you can do about the Pika sign? Because that is a traffic hazard. How bright the Pika sign, the electric LED. I drive that road every night to pick up my daughter from dance. It is so bright that it blinds you while you're driving.
You can register your plane already.
Not that I will. It is very, I don't know if you guys have a maximum intensity of an LED sign, but it is very.
Which one is this one?
The Pika sign, the newer LED sign.
We do have a,
Wow. It is extremely intense.
Westchester Plane.
It's, I don't think, we don't have an intensity specific.
So,
Well, we
one more
deal with-
example of where we need to have better definition.
Absolutely. So I've done it further, thank you.
Is that with any last, any questions?
well, I noticed that corner, so what's going on with Kelly Sports? Is that still open or is that?
It is.
Oh, it
It's
is,
still
so it's,
So obviously they don't,
Bill, hang on, is this just a general
yeah.
conversation?
Well, I'm just
We'll
worried,
talk after the
well, I'm
meeting.
just worried another 200 unit apartment
Well,
complex might end up.
let's wait, that's kind of a speculative conversation,
Okay.
so let's keep on the agenda.
Okay.
Number 12, approval of Board of Supervisors meeting minutes for October the 19th and November the 6th. Hang on. Could I have I want to approve these separately because I'm not going to vote on the first one because I did not attend that meeting. So is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes for October the 19th?
Yes.
Is there a second? Thank you, Ashley. Is there any board corrections, comments, or questions about the minutes for October the 19th? Are there any public questions or comments about the minutes for October the 19th?
Yes, thank you, Chris. I just like your minutes.
Okay, a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Approved 4-0. West Goshen Township Board of Supervisors meeting minutes for November the 8th, 2021. You have made a motion to approve. Is there a second? Thank you, Ashley. I have two corrections for the minutes, Chris. I believe on the second page at the very top, Kristen advised that the proposed ordinance for the plastic bag ban would be considered by the board at the December meeting, which is December 21st, not the November meeting. And then on page 4, middle of the page, Ms. Garnier asked about the length of the contract with Westchester Fire Department. Mr. Allon stated the contract runs through, I believe it's 2023.
23, correct.
Yeah, 2025.
Oh, I thought it was 10-year.
5-year contract.
You may have said 10, but it's 5, so the minutes can reflect the actual. There's a lot, you know.
Yeah, we discussed the 10.
I voted for
that.
that.
We discussed the motion.
Thank you. Who's made the motion? Okay, we're good. Any public comments or questions?
Well, I have a question.
Oh, sorry.
On page 3, in the first paragraph there, concerning the presentation from Mr. Everhart, the Goshen Fire Company, in the middle of the paragraph it says, Mr. Everhart stated that they did, well, back up for a second. Mr. Walsh, 8th of other municipalities increased their funding in 2021. Mr. Everhart stated that he did and reviewed the funding for each municipality. Do you have that information, Chris, as to what numbers that of the funding from each municipality?
I don't believe he went over the actual increases. He just went over the allocation.
Okay, well that's what I'm questioning. So he really didn't review the funding. He may have mentioned that there was funding from each municipality, but that's one of the pieces of information, quite frankly, I'm requesting from them to get that. So I would suggest stated that they did and just leave it like that.
Where was this?
And remove and review the funding for each municipality.
Just say he stated that they did.
Yeah,
and
just
then
period.
Scratch the rest of the sentence because he did review it.
And further down on that same page, on the, I guess the third paragraph from the bottom, Mr. Everhart reviewed how they arrived at the funding request before the board. I checked my notes and I did not see any particular algorithm or equation, how they came up with it. So, do you have that information?
He didn't discuss an algorithm, but he discussed that they came to it from trying to model the Westchester contract, looking at, I think he talked about call volume and assessed valuation. That was what it was referencing.
Okay, so if we could have some more specific information, reviewing how they arrived at the funding request, referencing call volume, and whatever else he may have done.
I believe it was call volume and assessed valuation property.
Okay.
I'm not sure he did the latter. He certainly mentioned call volume. I think it was only Westchester that did assess valuation of property. I only recall Graham saying call volume. But if you check the video, we got four amendments there now. Is there any others, John?
No, that's it.
Are you amending your motion? Thank you. Actually, good.
Yes.
That's depending on confirmation of the video.
Very good. Any questions on the minutes from the public? All those in favor of approval say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Approved 4-0. Item 13, approval of the Treasurer's Report dated October 31st, 2021 for the General Fund, the Sewer Revenue Fund, the Waste and Recycling Fund, and the Capital Reserve Fund, and the bills to be paid from these funds. Do I have a motion for approval of the funds, reports, and the bills to be paid? Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, John. Are there any questions or comments from the board on the bills? I have one. The last one on prepaid fund 30, page 67. Yes, the last entry, Marilyn Quinn was reimbursed $2,500 for a Ravens Lane stormwater damage patio in the easement.
Yes.
Did she repair it and then submit an expense for reimbursement, or did you?
It's a very bad situation.
Yeah, there was a patio right in the middle of the project that we had to move.
Yeah.
She wouldn't give us the easement without it.
Yep.
So when we put it back, one of our 100-year storms hit and washed it out.
Yep.
And part of it was we would put it back, but nobody else would have it there once it was gone or removed. And with the damage, we weren't going to just keep replacing it, so we made it disappear.
Correct.
Do you have that on you?
I do.
Okay.
What is she going to put that back, or what is she going to do?
Not there.
She's not allowed to. You've had her sign the amenity easement and not let her put a patio back.
Correct. Okay.
We left the block for it.
Yeah, and it looks much better for stormwater without the patio there, because it's a nice gravel.
We got a nice,
great job.
better gradient there.
Okay, thanks. I have no questions on the bill. Is there any other questions from the board? Are there any public questions on the bills today? Okay, so take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say nay. Bills are approved 4-0. Last agenda item is public comments. Are there any public comments tonight? No public comments? Thank you. It's getting late. Do you have a motion to adjourn? Thank you. In a second. All in favor, aye.
So Marty, what happened was Kelly's sold their business. And then the people who bought them do not do retail. So it's just, they still do, they do the orders and stuff, but they don't do anything else. And that's even, the only way you can put parking stuff is board.